Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, September 14th. Sorry we're getting started a few minutes late. We got to celebrate our employees at an outdoor picnic at Coke Park, and we are getting settled in, and it was a lovely, fantastic event, and we have the best staff in the whole world. Yes, and so, yes, getting us started on our work session agenda. We are going to continue our conversation on growth management and our edification about all the history and where we're at. So we have our community development staff here, Cindy Hubin and Suzanne Wolf and Zach Hendricks. And I did miss the first part, but I watched it with much enjoyment, and it was a great conversation. So I look forward to having another good conversation today. And I'll turn it over to you, Cindy.
Thank you. As Kelly said, today is a collaboration with our staff, Suzanne and Zach and Leslie, who might still be talking at the picnic.
And I see Ellen on here
hopefully
too.
Leslie will be here soon. So this is part 2 of our educational background series on Pickens County growth management and the Pickens County growth management quota system itself. And just to recap a little bit, on August the 10th, we had our session where we talked about the reason growth management got started in the first place way back in the 70s, and then the growth management system itself that started in 1978, June 12th, 1978 to be exact. And today we really want to focus on, we only have an hour, so I'm going to ask you to please hold your questions this time until the end, and we're going to try to focus on bringing you the understanding of the mechanics of the growth management system today, and with a little bit of background that you asked for at our last session. And so with that, I won't go through lessons learned from last session, but I'm sure you have your own thoughts about that as well. And with that, I'll just hop right into some of the questions you asked last time for us to bring information forward. And we have looked at the build out for Pickens County, which you asked us to do. And there's currently about 3,771 dwelling units in unincorporated Pickens County. And with that, we have an additional 1,722 dwelling units left under full build out if you are going to use our zoning to its maximum. And 1,722 units left to be able to be built. And Zach, of course, did our calculations for us, and he looked at our growth rates over the last several years, and it looks like a maximum build out would take us about 132 years at the growth rate that we have today, based on our very low growth rate, which is I think at around 1.2% growth rate or 1.7% growth rate today. Another very interesting thing that we think is interesting in terms of looking at the new residences, we went back to 2014 because we're going to show you a map here in a minute that's based on 2014, but based on going back to 2014 and trying to find how many new residences we've had since 2014, there have been about 227. And of those, about 100, or roughly 50% of those have been scrape and replace.
Oh, wow.
So that's an interesting thing. I used to give the board the statistic that I thought we were at about 40% redevelopment, and we're more like 50% redevelopment, or closer to 50% these days of redevelopment. And we have about a third of remaining build out, roughly, in Pitkin County. So that's some information you asked about, and if you want to refer back to that, that's in your packet in attachment 1. The second thing, first of all, I would like to step back. We have some very talented people on our staff, and
Walt Disney.
and here we have a cartoon that Tammy Cochin developed for us about growth management. And I don't know if you can read that very well, but Suzanne, your eyes are probably better than mine. Maybe you'd like to read and take us through
She
this.
suggested we do it in the Donald Duck voice, but I don't really think I'm qualified to do that.
We should have had Tammy do
come
that.
on.
But, yeah, Tammy couldn't join us today, so this was her, she helped with some of the
Our
background
contribution.
materials, and yes, she contributed this, but. Oh boy, my very own piece of Pitkin County. I should build something on it. Lots of big ideas. I know, I want an extra big house, or maybe more than one house. Hi, ComDev, got big plans. How do I start? This is when we come in. In the land use code, blah, blah, growth management, blah, blah, competition, blah, blah, application, blah, blah. Donald Duck doesn't look too happy, but yeah, so anyway, we figured we had to do something to spice it up, because I'm sure you all start to feel that way as well when you hear us talking
So
about.
this is kind of like the
growth
rope-a-dope
management.
strategy.
But you know what? You can blame it on the courts because you put the courthouse there.
Just
blame
looking
it
for
on the judicial
a good
system.
picture.
But with that, you can
More.
tell that we've had quite a bit of changes over time. And exhibit, or attachment 3, I think, in your packet, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's our land use code timeline for growth management and related issues. If you can refer back in your mind to the anatomy of the land use code that we looked at last time with all the different boxes and where things started, comprehensive plans or our master plans are critical to what happens with our land use code and advises us. But in 1978, that's when we started the first growth management system that you learned about last time. And then I'll jump really quickly to, I think, the next significant change that we want to kind of set the stage with this time. In 2000, I was there. These guys, well, Suzanne was there. And we did a county moratorium on growth management, because then we felt like there was a crisis of what are we doing with our growth management system. So that moratorium, there was a creation of a growth management house size exemption. And before that, house size was limited to 15,000 square feet. But in 2000, there was a new angle on it, which said 5,750 square feet, which was the thought of having a 5,000 square foot house and a 750 square foot garage, became the new exemption, if you will, for growth management. So if you had a lot in Pitkin County and you wanted to build on it, you were exempt to just come in without growth management up to 5,750 square feet. If you wanted more than that, that's when we started changing and tweaking with growth management. And we shifted at that point. A big shift in the system occurred when we said, we're going to go from the original unit by unit count to a square footage system. And also added in the exemption of transferable development rights to allow the relief valve, if you will, to go above 5,750 square feet. So that all happened in 2000. It was a really fun year. Then,
I remember it well.
then in 2006, another major thing happened, and we totally rewrote the land use code for the first time since 78, or I think it might have been 74. We rewrote the land use code, and it wasn't the first major tweak we did, but it was a major overhaul. And at that time, in 2000 we said, you're limited to 5,750 if you're in the rural parts of Pitkin County. And then in 2006, we brought in the urban growth area boundaries in Pitkin County to also include the 5750 limitation. So those are the big changes, I think, that we want you to key in on today as we go through a lot of our conversation with you. But we also had a map that came out of a lot of our master plan revisions that were done right around 2014. And this is just such a great map. We're going to update it with our new data that Zach has gotten for us. But the data here just shows by planning area basically what the build out is and what's occurring in those areas today. So it's kind of, in 2014 data. We used this in 2017 in the master plans, and we will update it again. There were some methodology wrinkles, and we want to get it right, so we didn't just quickly update it. But you can imagine about 100 new units being spread across the county since 2014, and 100 units also being replaced.
So this is a 2014 map? Is that what
It's a 2017 map based on 2014 data.
Got it. For a quick question, just looking at, it says Brush Creek Caucus area. Now Brush Creek just formed their caucus.
Well,
So this is just what you were calling it.
it's a planning area,
Okay.
Brush Creek planning area that we used.
Okay.
We put together a master plan for Brush Creek before you developed a caucus.
Got it.
So we probably shouldn't have said caucus.
Before they did, I should say.
Right, before they did.
Little discouraging for Crystal River area. It's got lots of possible build-outs.
Mm-hmm.
Look
Yeah.
at the east of Aspen caucus.
So,
What do we
Yeah, well, they
anticipate
are built out. They don't have many more remaining.
for change? I'm just, yeah, some of these numbers really are shocking to me.
Yeah.
are they?
And how will this change after Zach redoes it? Like where are we? I'm trying to understand how accurate this is today.
Well, we'll update it for you soon. But right now, I think we need to just keep moving because we
Sure.
only have an hour. And please hold your thoughts on those kinds of
Okay,
questions
sorry.
because it is fascinating information. Or at least we think so.
Yeah, it is,
But
totally.
with that, Suzanne and Leslie are here to explain how the system works today. So when we start thinking about the future and when we go out into our public outreach, as you've instructed us to do in 2022, bless you, and when we look back on some of the data that we are acquiring for you now in light of all these things, keep in mind that this system is a system that we understand there are issues with, and we'll get back to that in part 3.
Okay,
Suzanne?
all right, we'll move on from Donald Duck. Okay, sorry about this. I don't want to join audio. Sorry, I was going to try and blow that up, but it's blocking my little.
Where it says 45%.
I can't.
Oh.
Maybe if I look up there, it will let me take my.
I think you have to do it from the document.
No, it's.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, we'll roll from there. I'm blocked on my screen from doing it. So, really walking through the very basics of growth management and understand that, right, there's a lot of places here where you could, drill a lot.
Sorry, we've
Oh.
lost some connection.
Okay.
And that's not in our packet, that.
This is not in your packet.
Can we try to blow it up? Sorry, I just think some people at
Maybe,
home might really
Zach-
take interest in this.
How do I get rid of that so I can actually get to my, or do you know how other ways to click it? It just wanted that. Okay, thank you. It's so great to have somebody who's.
One more time.
One more
How about
time.
100%?
Go to 100,
Um,
Michaela.
Great.
There you go.
Yay.
Whoever that was.
Yeah, here, I'm gonna look at this one first.
Okay.
So this, just to walk through, very basically, when we talk growth management and competition, And again, mostly what we're going to talk about today is the growth management competition. Always knowing that there's this whole other side, which is everything that's exempt from growth management competition, which is a whole different conversation. But this is competition. So these are the categories we have: residential new lots. So that's if you're subdividing your property or creating new 35-acre parcels that have no development right. You have to compete in growth management for that. Residential development additions, additional floor area. You have the right to build 5750 on your property, but you'd like to build more than that. You compete in growth management.
We're not seeing
What?
that. Do you have a different table that you're reading from?
I'm just walking through the 4 types of development.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
Yep. And then commercial and tourist accommodations. So those are the 4 categories that we score applications on. And just to understand, each one of those categories has its own deadline. Applications are all submitted on that deadline, and then those applications go through the process together because, in theory, it's a competition. So those are the deadline, those are the categories and the deadlines. So then if we go to that other table, this breaks it down further into, we differentiate between the rural area and the urban growth boundary. And so they have separate competitions and separate, what's shown here as allotment ceilings or buckets of square footage that are available for the competition that year. And again, those are broken down for residential into new lots and parcels or additional floor area. Point to note here is that these allotments were reduced by the BOCC just last year. I think it was sort of beginning of 2020. I couldn't quote you what the numbers were before that, but there was a substantial reduction in the amount of floor area available in all of those residential categories on an annual basis. These are available each year. If nobody comes in for those, they go away. This doesn't roll into the next year, so suddenly the pool is twice the size it was the year before. It just, if it doesn't get used, it goes away. And then just quickly, commercial and tourist accommodations have a different, it's not a square footage calculation. EGUs is employee generation units. Mm-hmm. So with commercial development, it's, I'm building some type of commercial, a new restaurant. A restaurant generates X number of employees per square foot. So you're competing based on the employee generation units. And for tourist accommodations, it's 31 units. Those 2 categories have not been touched in terms of how much is available and how, things are scored. Through all of that history Cindy was showing back to 2000 when we did, a major shift in how we do residential growth management, we did not make changes to commercial and tourist accommodations and still have not. So again, that's just, those numbers have carried forward, I think, as long as I've been here.
Do we meet those quotas every year?
I'm sorry?
Do we meet those quotas? The commercial and tourist?
No. I mean, we rarely see any commercial or tourist accommodations competition. And I guess maybe to your point, in terms of residential, in your packet, I did give you those tables that kind of break down in residential over the last, I think since 2001, where, allotments have been granted, whether or not they've been built or not. So that information is in your packet for residential. So then I'm just going to walk you through the steps of what it looks like to come in to go through a growth management application. And again, just pointing out that yellow box off to the side, not forgetting that there are exemptions. A lot of development happens without coming through the growth management competition system. But if you have a new lot or you're competing for additional floor area, you apply by that deadline. There's a limited pool of square footage. We just showed that. It doesn't carry forward. So however many applications submit on a certain date, then we schedule them to move forward together to go to the Planning Commission. The application is scored based on the benefits and merits of the project. If you're subdividing, you're looking at your subdivision as a whole and what benefits you might be able to provide. With additional floor area, you're competing based on your single lot. If you're a lot in Starwood, was the most recent one we saw, and you're competing for additional floor area, you don't get to take advantage of things that were already done with the subdivision. Starwood has a lot of common open space in their subdivision. You don't get to take credit for that today in order to compete for additional floor area. That's already said and done. You have to come up with commitments based on your own property, or what you can offer based on that. We'll talk more about the specific scoring criteria, so we'll get to that. But so we basically take it through, staff reviews the application, does a draft scoring that we then present to the P&Z, saying here's what we think you would get, how they'd get scored. The P&Z then is authorized under the code to score the application. So they do scoring rounds. If there's more than one application, they do that. They come up with a final score. If an application has to meet threshold, there's always a threshold score in each of those categories that you have to meet to be eligible for an allotment. If you don't meet that, no allotment. If there are multiple applications, the one with the highest score gets their allotment first, then the second, and then the third. So if there are multiple applications, you could risk, not getting an allotment if there are more people in line ahead of you who have higher scores. So that's kind of part of the system, is you have to meet threshold, and then you have to kind of, we'll talk a little bit about playing the game. I always think about growth management as a bit of a game, because you play different pieces, depending what you have to offer. So you have to play the game in order to determine not just meeting threshold, but how many other people do you think are going to be in the competition this year? Most planning consultants know, because they know who else is doing what and what they're bringing forward. But that's how it's supposed to work, is nobody knows until the application comes to us.
Can I ask a really basic question? So the people who go through this process are applying for, to be able to build more than 5,750 square feet, because if you're building less than that, you're exempt from this process, correct?
Correct.
And so, what, are you gonna talk about the criteria that allows people to do this?
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll get to the
great, thank
criteria. And just to clarify, more than 5,750 for additional floor area, or you're subdividing your property, creating new lots.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
new lots need a new development right.
Yeah.
So that's the two pieces for residential.
Can I ask a question about the EGUs and the hotel rooms? So historically, we haven't even had competition because there just hasn't been that much growth. So I'm wondering would it make sense to change those numbers for any reason now?
Yes, and we'll talk about that.
Thank you, okay.
in part
Move on to that.
three.
But it doesn't include STRs
Short-term rentals, no.
yet.
No, we don't include that in the growth management system. We have talked about it.
Okay,
All right, let's keep moving.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Supposed
we've
to go
got,
for
we're
a
at the
question.
P&Z. The P&Z scores the applications, rank them based on meeting threshold, who gets the allotments. The P&Z awards the allotment. That is something that has changed in the past. It came up to the BOCC. There was just a lot of process of steps, and so now we have it set up that the P&Z actually awards the allotments. We forward those scores to the BOCC during the appeal period, which gives the BOCC the opportunity to see what has been scored, what score they received. And again, the BOCC, as well as any member of the public, would have the opportunity to appeal the scoring that the P&Z gave it, based on the criteria in the code for what constitutes an appeal, for an appeal. So anyway, that would be, so it's not, the BOCC is not scoring growth management applications, just so that's clear. The P&Z has that authority. Allotments, once granted, expire after 5 years, except for certain new development rights, and that's new from 2020, if you all remember those code amendments. Prior to that, it said growth management allotments do not expire. So anybody who got an allotment up through that date in 2020, their allotments do not expire. So those allotments you saw on that table in your packet, those are ones that won't expire, except I think there was one in 2021 that I added. That one would have a 5-year expiration date on it, but the others If you haven't built the house on the new lot you created in subdivision 20 years ago, you still have a development right associated with that from growth management that you can exercise when you're ready. So then this last piece, provide, applicants make commitments in scoring. Make a donation to something, I'm gonna create a trail easement, I'm gonna do those things. We captured those commitments in a covenant that's recorded against the property. So we say, right, these are the things you agreed you'd do, and you have to do those things prior to or concurrent with the building permit that utilizes the square footage you've been granted. So that's that last piece there. Okay, now I have to zoom back out. This shows you our scoring criteria. And again, we're really doing this based on residential, since that's obviously the majority of what we're doing. So let me scroll down a little bit so I think you can see all of these categories. So impact on public and private facilities breaks down into fire, roads, transit trails. Effect on the environment has water resources and wildlife habitat protection. Achievement of community goals has open space preservation, development below allowable density, hazard avoidance, and reduction of visible mass. So then each of those categories has certain points associated with it. Everything really has a 0, 1, or 2, and certain categories have multipliers. Because we've said, well, say wildlife habitat protection is something that is really important to us, so we feel like that justifies having a multiplier on top of the score that they might be given. So that's, kind of generally how it works. And then at the bottom there, you can say, for residential, and this is for the rural area, of the 30 points available, if you got all the points you could possibly, a minimum of 22 must be obtained for allocation of a new lot, and a minimum of 20 for additional floor area. So those are your thresholds. That's the threshold scores I was mentioning. So again, we're going to keep getting a little bit more detail to hang on this for you, but that just, I think, gives you a nice graphic version of this next page, which is the not so attractive version from the code, the blah, blah, blah version of, again, scoring, how we score, that you can get points available 0 to 2. Multiplier, potential score shows you what your maximums are. Would you like let's see, the top one is UGB, bottom rural area. Since we were talking more rural area,
Can you make that, yeah?
Yep, I'm about to.
Thank you.
I was just trying to figure out which, I'm gonna go down to that lower one. So that was, again, just to be comparable to what we were just talking about. This is in the rural area, the categories we're scoring. There are some categories we don't in the urban growth boundary that differ. And again, that's kind of going farther down into the details. And then, you okay with that?
Yeah, except for what does reduction of visible mass mean?
So it breaks down into, there are 3 pieces to it. Potentially a reduction in floor area, so less than what you might be allowed. My zone district allows me to build 15,000 square feet, but I'll commit to only building 10.
Like what the fails did.
They didn't have to.
They didn't go through competition.
Yeah.
But reduction in height,
Okay.
and potentially putting some of your allotted square footage below grade.
Okay.
Those are the 3 components in each one of those that you would be scored on. So then just the next piece, I must be zoomed out. Let's see what we get here. Maybe that's gone. Maybe I'm missing some of my pages. Okay. What?
Can we get this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah, I can send it to you, and I'm sorry, that's gone. I'm gonna have to go out and,
Could you go higher up?
no, it's just not there.
Do I need to go make copies of it?
No, I can, actually, well,
I'm gonna go make copies.
why don't you, I think they'll be helpful. I can still I'll pull it up from, elsewhere. But so the next slide was more just showing an example of a 0, a 1, and a 2. And it does vary based on those different categories, but very basically, a 0 means you're really not even meeting the code. Really, nobody's going to come into a growth management with a growth management application and not meet the code. So we rarely, have a 0. A 1, oh, see, Zach's. Why does it work for you and not for me?
Because it's Zach.
Because it's Zach, and he's more savvy than I am. Again, so what's written here is very specific to the facilities, so fire, road, transit trails. This is the language that we use when we go in and say, do I think this gets a score of 1 or a score of 2? But like I was saying, a 0, you're not even meeting code. A 1 is you're meeting code and you're meeting the needs of your project. A 2 means you're meeting the needs of maybe your surrounding area, your neighborhood, there's a problem, a road issue, lack of trail connection, something that you can do in the broader area beyond just your own development. So, that does vary as you get into water resources is going to have a different version of what a 0, 1, and a 2 is. Same with wildlife, those things. But just to sort of give you, again, that general sense of what we're looking at when we're scoring in those categories that you saw. Okay, one more page, and then this is what Cindy will bring you a paper copy of. And I'll just give a little intro, and then Leslie gets to jump in too. So again, Tammy, who we're missing today, but pulled this together for us just to try and give you a sense of, for the different types of residential applications we score. So on the left, you can see the different colors, red, green, blue, and the last one's kind of purplish, I guess. Commitments we've gotten from an actual application in each of those categories, and what they were competing for. So red, new development right in the urban area. What were some of the commitments they made in these categories to get points? These were all applications that received allocations, so they successfully competed in growth management to move forward. I was just going to say, actually, there was one other thing. Oh, before I let Leslie jump in there, and maybe you'll touch on this a little bit, but I touched on scoring based on the merits, based on your property and what you can offer. There's also a provision in the code called proportionality under the scoring provision, which says the P&Z should consider whether each commitment made by the applicant is proportional to the size of the allotment being granted. In other words, an applicant seeking an allotment for a large amount of floor area would be expected to make a proportionally greater commitment to obtain the same score as an applicant seeking a lesser amount of floor area. I just want to point that out as something that causes lots of consternation for staff, the P&Z applicants. What is proportional to an additional 2,500 square feet? Does it differ from Red Mountain to the Crystal? Does it, again, that's just language that's difficult for us, but I think it has also led to, we get some commitments that come in the form of dollar donations. And so then there also becomes this, difficult place to figure out what's enough when somebody's making a donation. So, Leslie, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, the fire station was getting some bucks.
Yeah, that brush truck, man.
Brush truck.
So just very briefly, because Cindy and Suzanne really covered the foundation of the GMP, but with this chart, so, what do we get when someone comes through the GMP process? And it's very difficult for someone to meet the threshold and not, and just meet the threshold and be done. So we see applications come in that are offering beyond what just the code is going to require. So what is the benefit to the community? And that's what gets you to score. So what you're seeing here in these categories are the contributions that various applicants have made through the growth management process. And it is actually specific language in the code. So for example, fire protection, you know, one of the criteria is commitment of an applicant to provide or pay for fire protection facilities that may be necessitated by the project or that may improve fire protection capabilities in the neighborhood. And we also, so you see that also for the road system. So I did an application within the urban growth boundary, additional floor area on fully maintained, full capacity road. They weren't gonna commit to repaving the road or building a new road because they didn't have to. So they got creative and they talked about, you know, giving money to Red Mountain Road Association, for example, additional money to Public Works for a broader area than just where the application is, or the school district to help with traffic on Maroon Creek Road. Another project that I did that was a subdivision in the rural area. Again, a lot of these projects are really site-specific, how you can get more community benefit, how an applicant can provide more community benefit. With a subdivision in the rural area, it was along the river. It also had some critical wildlife habitat up on the slopes. So they provided a fisherman's easement, a conservation easement over the entire property, protection for the critical habitat on the steeper slopes. They also, because they're in the rural area, they, if you could scroll, if you guys look down on the far
Zach's
right-hand
our
corner.
scroller.
Oh, Zach's a scroller. So the reduction of visible mass. Here we have the 30% below allowable height, 25% reduction in the 15,000 square foot allowed, and then 30% of what they were requesting was below grade. So that provides them more points than, you know, just their one point. So it really, in my experience, it's really been where these projects are located. And as Suzanne touched on, if you're talking about an applicant that's seeking additional floor area and their property abuts Castle Creek, for example, versus an applicant seeking additional floor area in Starwood that is completely surrounded by open space, amenities, and an infrastructure that totally supports the neighborhood. That's where you see the difference in an applicant providing more money to RAFTA or open space and trails or public works versus an applicant actually able to provide a fisherman's easement and a boat put in on Castle Creek. Same projects outside the urban growth boundaries seeking additional square footage, but because of their location, they were able to provide different benefits and amenities to the community. We do have two sections here where it's the water, it's open space preservation and wildlife habitat protection. We don't penalize an applicant if their property is located in an area that has no critical wildlife habitat. So the code provides that they will get a 2. We will not give them a 0 because they're not doing anything to support wildlife habitat. Similarly with open space preservation, if you are a property that has no open space value, we don't penalize that applicant and they also score a 2.
And I just was gonna jump in too, and just like you see a lot of this where it says no additional commitments, really means that they met the score of 1 in a certain category because they're meeting the standards of the code. you know, whether that's hazard mitigation, right, you're avoiding the constraints. You know, what does a 2 look like? Maybe, right, there's something, you know, again, above and beyond you can do. But when I said sort of it's a game earlier, you know, you look at it that way and you go, well, okay, I can meet the basic criteria, no additional commitments in certain categories, but then in order to meet threshold, I'm gonna have to offer something up in one of these categories. So maybe that's wildlife habitat protection, and they can say, I can do a riparian restoration project, and I'm gonna get more points there, which means I can get less points in a different category. So that's where I always think of it as a game, where you try and figure out where to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of getting more points versus not in other categories. I mean, with some properties, you know, it would be very difficult for them to get points in a category due to, you know, something specific. So again, they're looking where else they can get more points to make up the difference.
I want to add on to that. The code also provides that the P and Z, when they score a project, they can add bonus points onto the project in some categories. So for example, I worked on a project that they did not tear down and replace, they were just adding additional square footage. And one of the P and Z members, in his personal scoring, gave them bonus points because they weren't tearing down the old building, they were refurbishing the old building. And so he elected to give them bonus points for that. But that's the P and Z.
So with that, that's a lot of information. It's a lot about the structure, the types of growth management categories that we have, both in the urban growth boundary area and the rural area. And you understand they have different systems, different scoring criteria and systems. But we're stopping now to ask if you have any questions of us on this material.
Okay, we have about 13 minutes. So Patty, then Francie.
Real quick, well, you answered my one question about I forgot about the deadline that you have to use your allotments, because if you look at the information you gave us on the tracker, there's a lot of people who waited a lot of years to build. And do we have any idea how much of this GMQS allotment are still hanging out there?
All the ones that don't show up, I mean, in the end, I don't have a total number,
Yeah,
but.
that might be interesting to,
Yeah.
not like I want it right now, but just a thought. The other thing too is, here's something to think about, and I don't know how much the board's going to appreciate this. We might wanna do a little homework assignment and give the board an application and have them score it.
That'd be fun.
It is the hardest thing I think I've ever done, one of the hardest things I've ever done as a county commissioner. Well, I did it on planning and zoning, was to have to score. It was very difficult, and a lot of thought went into it. But it just might be just a good, you know, here's an example of a basic application for GMQS competition, and how would you look at scoring it? Just to either before or after we make some decisions, but at some point, so we can actually see what has to be looked at and how it's looked at, and what the public has to go through to submit for GMQS, and what planning and zoning has to go through to score it. Just a thought.
That's a good idea.
And maybe do that with a additional square footage one, or?
That's probably easiest, I mean, straightforward, if you get
Yeah,
into subdivision, there's so many
So it
different.
wouldn't be like.
Yeah, but we
it's
had
not
one
like
that
reading
came
War and Peace
in
overnight.
January that the P and Z scored, and, you know, they got an allotment, so it would be really easy to write.
Yeah, I just
Just
thought that
basically
that's a
give you
good
their
hands-on.
application and say, try this out.
And I'm exempt because I've already done it, so.
I'm exempt because I've
Teach it.
delegated that to the P and Z.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Francie, you had questions?
Yes, I just need to bolster my sort of understanding of the basics. So, so I have a piece of property and I want to build a house and I want it to be more than 5,750 square feet. And in that area, wherever I am, there are so many extra square feet available
Yes.
for development. So I put in this application and I pad it with $15,000 for trash something or other somewhere, hoping that that'll give me a little bit more points than somebody who gave you $12,000 for something, or, so I definitely get the game part of it, and, so then you guys score it, and you award as many square feet, there was 11,520, whatever that number was for one of the areas. So you award that many extra square feet for residential development in that area. And the people who don't get that either wait and come back the next year or build under 5,750 square feet, or, and how much can they ask for extra?
Up to the maximum in their zone district. So 15,000 in most
Really?
areas. In some areas.
Does that
that's not-
affect the scoring?
Pardon me?
Does how much extra square footage they're asking for negatively affect their score?
It affects the scoring in that you get more points for under that, what is it, reduction of visible mass. When I said
Okay.
one of the pieces of that is right. I'm willing to limit myself to 7,500 square feet when zoning would allow me 15. And that is a 50% reduction, you would get 2 points. If it would, again, so those are very sort of straightforward number
I see.
calculations. If I reduce it by 50%, if I reduce it by 25%, you get this many points.
And then, like, giving water back to the county, I would think that would be fairly heavily weighted, but it's just up to 2 points.
Yeah.
Can I just
But
add something? real
I was
quick?
also, let me just clarify too, one thing, right, if you didn't get this, you could also decide, well, if you're in the rural area and you're not in a subdivision, you could also request special review approval to land a TDR. So there's your other alternative for that additional floor area.
So you don't make
a
it through this
diff-
because you're not really that willing to mitigate and do this and do that. And so then you say, okay, well, I'll just do TDRs instead of this.
Right.
And then there's also the lottery.
There's no
There's a-
lottery.
There's a lottery, or was that this?
That's the competition system.
Okay, so if you don't make it through this, you still can apply for a TDR. So that means you can privately buy a TDR from somebody. And then you guys have no control over that. Once they get that TDR, you don't have jurisdiction anymore. They just get that extra 2,500 square feet.
No, it varies. I mean, we've specified places that can use the TDR by right, but they do have to come through our site plan process. So the urban growth boundary, Starwood, certain subdivisions, Starwood, Owl Creek, some of the, subdivisions where, we've seen the larger development, they can use the TDR once they go through site plan review. They don't need approval to use the TDR, but other areas of the county have to go through special review, which is a public hearing before the hearing officer.
That's because of their master plans in those areas?
It's
or
that's just code. I mean, one of the considerations is what your master plan, compliance, consistency with, but the way the code is set up is if you're rural area and you're not one of the list of 10 subdivisions, you have to request special review approval to be a TDR receiver site.
And the idea, Francie, was that there are certain places where that is the character of the neighborhood. So
Where what is, big houses?
larger homes
Uh-huh.
with more square footage is the character of the neighborhood. So we've exempted them from going through a special review process. But everywhere else, you have to go through a special review process in order to see if you are compatible with the master plan and that you meet certain criteria. And you're correct in that certain master plans have said, and then it's been codified in the land use code, that we only want to see, because of the character of our neighborhood, 8250 or 5750. We don't want more. So you've got various master plans that have different allowances based on the character of their community.
And It's not exactly law, but you recognize that when you do.
Actually, we have codified all that and made it law through the master plans recommended. So the last one that came through was the Maroon Creek master plan said, we only want to have houses of 5750. We don't want to be larger than that. So the next step that had
Maroon
to,
Creek said that?
yeah. So the next step that
Interesting.
had to happen.
Going forward, of course.
Yeah. So the next step that had to happen was, we brought the master plan forward to the P&Z and the board, and we said, their recommendation is that they only allow 5,750 square feet in Maroon Creek. We need to put that in the land use code as a provision. So now, anybody who wants to develop and you adopted that through public hearings, and now anybody who wants to develop in Maroon Creek knows in the in the land use code that they can only go up to 5750. So there's no use in buying a TDR or going through a growth management review.
Okay, at some point, could we get the restrictions in the different areas in the county? That would be,
Yes.
that'd be great, thank you.
I just wanted to add real quick, Francie, so you know too, you may be doing a GMQS application to compete and nobody else competes. So you could put the world in there thinking, because you don't know. You don't know if you're gonna be the only one or there's gonna be 20 other people, and you don't know what anybody else is offering. Once you submit your application, you've submitted it. You can't go back in and go, well, he offered 10, I'm gonna bump it to 15. That's how it is. You have a deadline to apply. So you don't know, and a lot of people come in and they're the only ones, and they've given away a lot of stuff, and that's their application. We don't say, oh, you're the only one, we're gonna waive all the stuff you offered us. No, we're keeping that in the application.
So may I add on to that? So the competition is really kind of twofold in that there's a finite amount of square footage that's available each year. So if you had a lot of applications that came in and what they were asking for, people have to clearly specify the square footage they're asking. And they also have to provide us some level of design, particularly with this reduction of visible mass, so we can score that. But, so there's the finite square footage cap. So if you have multiple applications and they all exceeded that square footage, the top score gets that. But you're also then competing with all those applications for the benefits you're providing the community and how you're getting scored. So, like Patty said and Susanna said, if you think you're the only person and you come in and you don't meet threshold, doesn't matter if you're the only person, you don't get that square footage.
Okay.
Plus your square footage, if there's 10 applications and they all score about the same, they can all get awarded smaller amounts. So if I want 5 and he asks for 6, and there's enough of us to take up the 11,000 that's available or whatever it is, then we all may get 1,000 if there's 20 applications. So,
Don't you go down the rank?
or do you rank it by 100
Right,
points?
if you get the top score, you get your whole allotment.
What if 5 people get, they tie?
It's,
Has that ever happened?
I don't know that we've.
I don't know if that's ever.
Then you
Yeah.
divvy it up. Take what you
So
can get.
I guess I would be curious,
know.
how many that have lost have gone through the TDR route, you know, and functionally ended up getting what they wanted anyway.
Or how many have come back?
And I mean, I would say that not many. I mean, we can certainly, and that's just totally off the top of my head. I mean, because again, up front, somebody has the option to decide which route they want to take. The dynamics change when a TDR's $1 million.
Yeah.
Versus when a TDR was 200.
How many did you get for September 1st?
One. New lot.
With a TDR?
No,
No,
growth
no,
management
growth
competition.
management.
And I've had a conversation about, well, maybe we'll submit an application for growth management, and if we don't win, then we'll think about buying a TDR.
But that, like Suzanne said, might be changing because.
Well, it's just interesting because it undermines like the pacing portion of growth management, right? In a way, I mean, I don't know. Yes
And
no,
then,
I guess.
and they don't have to mitigate anything with the TDR. They don't have to do any of the stuff. Like,
Well,
they don't
special
have to
review
offer
criteria.
anything to improve their community.
Well, essentially, they're meeting code, and the TDR is what they're offering the community, is by taking development out of someplace where we wanted to see protected. I mean, that's the balance, or, you know, the pros and cons of what you might get from growth management versus what you get from a TDR being used.
And is the TDR purchase considered sales, land sales, or what is that considered? How does that get taxed?
They, once it's, the TDR, the development right has been stripped off, then, you know, the assessor reassesses it based on it being not developable.
No, but I mean, you know, if you build a house, you pay taxes for a certain, or if you buy property, you buy, you know, you pay the transfer tax and so on, and so is it TDR taxed?
No, we don't get a sales tax off its TDR. It's only taxed technically when you increase the square footage of your house, then the assessment of your house goes up, so your property taxes go up.
But so the person who sold the TDR doesn't pay any taxes on that income?
The person who sells the TDR probably has to pay income tax.
They have appreciation.
Yeah.
If they buy it low and sell it high, they'll have appreciation, you know, if they're cashing it out.
Most people don't buy them and sell them high. They buy them, they get them
Yeah.
for the transfer, and then they sell them. I haven't seen of anybody who, do we have people who are buying them as a commodity?
We have in the past, we have had,
Wish I had.
TDR.
Seriously. All right, we do have to wrap up here. We have some board
but-
interviews.
but-
But yeah, Greg, if you want the
I have some
last.
questions. I'll throw questions, but you don't have to answer them now.
Okay.
These are just questions I'd love to hear for future discussion. Can we add climate or carbon mitigation, or energy efficiency or production to GMQS scoring? Is that a good idea or not? I don't know if it's a good idea. It's a question. Let's see. What changes do you anticipate suggesting to us? You know, I'm assuming you're going to come and suggest some tweaks to the GMQS system. And if you are, I'd love to hear we haven't heard that yet. So that
Can
was
I
just-
answer that right now, because I want the public to understand that you have asked us to go out and do a public outreach process. So we wouldn't be bringing you anything initially, you know.
After the outreach then.
Right.
So you're saying, wait till after the outreach, Greg. I should know that, but thank you for clarifying. And then my last one, where was it? Okay, regarding commercial and hotels, there's rarely any competition for EGUs and hotel rooms. Would it make sense to adjust those numbers? Say we were looking at creating more of a steady state than a growth-oriented system there. There's still opportunities to build, but I'm just wondering, should we contemplate adjusting those numbers, either down? I don't think they're going to go up, but down is what I was thinking. I'd love to understand that better. And that's a future question. And then the final one is, it's a TDR question. Maybe I'll just reserve that for a future TDR discussion.
Which will be part of the growth management discussion.
Well, and I'll offer, I think I've mentioned it both to staff and you guys sort of throwing out there. I think it would be interesting for P&Z and in our public outreach to contemplate what demolition would do in the competition. You know, if we required competition for demolition permits, would that just force people to develop undeveloped lots? You know, or would there be a genuine competition for redevelopment?
Or deconstruction.
Yeah.
Landfill
Or deconstruction.
impact and
Yeah.
plus just
And climate change.
destruction of resources.
All right. Thank you. So interesting.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Really
Really helpful.
appreciate all this.
Thank you.
Very useful.
Okay.
It's in my
Presented
3-ring binder, and I'll trade it up there. Your Fernie binder.
All right, so next we are moving on to, we have interviews for Citizen Advisory Board, our Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, and we have our staff for the Healthy Rivers and Streams program, Lisa McDonald. You're gonna come up and join us here at this corner laptop. Hi.
Hi, how are you guys?
Oh, and let's, can
we
you
need
turn the
to
video
here.
on, Michaela, please?
I'm just gonna turn your video
We did that with
on
Cindy.
so we can see you where you are.
There we go.
Okay. And this on, McCann? Ready? Good. Hi,
Hi.
everybody. Thanks, Kelly. I am Lisa McDonald with the Healthy Rivers Program. I am filling in for Charlotte Anderson today for the River Board interviews. In front of you today are two applicants, Chris Lemons and Kirsten Neff is in person here with us today.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to interview her. Kirsten applied. She lives in the Roaring Fork watershed, which is, you know, we have two watershed spots on the board, and unfortunately those are filled right now. And so I caught Kirsten before she came in and let her know that she's probably not eligible at this moment, but I thought her resume was great and the board would want to speak with her anyway.
Definitely.
Yep, we caught it really late that she wasn't in the right district, but we can invite her up.
All right.
so you can just
Any
take your
questions for
seat.
Lisa before we do that? Okay. Kristen, come on up. Yeah, go ahead, sit there.
Lisa, why don't you just slide over? and give her-
Yeah.
All right, hi everything, yeah.
Hi,
As Lisa,
so-
I'm Kirsten Neff, Kirsten like an ear.
Okay.
As Lisa said, she let me know that there isn't currently a watershed position open, but happy to chat with you still and learn more about the Rivers and Streams Board. Background on me, I'm relatively new to the Roaring Fork Valley. I moved up, I met my partner, boyfriend, back in January 2019, skiing up here at Aspen. He's a longtime Valley resident, worked in snowmass lift maintenance for many years. He's an electrician, also works for Leitner Pama, the lift manufacturer. So when my job in Denver, which I still have, went remote because of COVID, I made the move up here, and just back in July we closed on our home in the Frying Pan Valley, so we're living at Seven Castles. I'm a hydrologist by training. I have my PhD in hydrology from the University of Arizona in my hometown of Tucson. That's where I grew up. I like to say that between here and living in LA briefly for my postdoc, I've been drinking Colorado River water for whether I've been in the basin or not. So,
Western
From the
slope
mouth
water.
to the headwaters, yeah.
My current job, the one that I brought with me from Denver, I'm the Southwest Rivers Program Manager for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and in that capacity I run grant-making programs for river restoration throughout the Southwest. The real meat of the programs I manage is actually down in New Mexico. On the Middle Rio Grande, I have a water leasing pilot program there with the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, and then I also manage some national river and streams habitat programs, our Bring Back the Native Fish program, and then I also help manage our Restore Colorado program, which is a relatively new program we've had the past few years that includes all kinds of habitat restoration across Colorado. That's a partnership with GOCO and Colorado DNR. So when I saw this opening on the board, or the application open, I was interested in applying because while I have a depth of experience in water science, hydrology, river and stream restoration, water leasing, I really haven't done much of that, or I'm not as familiar with the issues here in the Roaring Fork Valley. And now making the valley my home, I'd like to get more involved in that, and I thought bringing my scientific expertise to the water board would be a good opportunity for me to get more involved locally.
Okay. I'm sure the board has questions. Patty?
Yeah, thank you. You have an amazing resume that you brought forward. It was exciting to read. I think it's interesting you got your PhD in hydrology in a place that doesn't really have any water. But we appreciate your being here where we do have the water. I'm sorry that we can't consider you for this district, but we're going to keep this close at heart because we have maybe some other opportunities to get you involved in our healthy rivers and streams issues.
Yeah,
Well, it's pretty exciting for us, and so welcome to the. Can you also teach skiing?
Yes, yeah. Last year I signed up as a peak part-time instructor at Snowmass. You know, get a pass, and I also like working with kids. I have a background working with kids outdoors, teaching them
saw
like
that.
geology, hydrology outdoors. So I thought that would be a fun way to A, get a pass, and B, you know, develop a new skill. So I did go through the process of getting my PSIA certifications last year, and I'm planning to work again this year. I'm on the list. I got to do some exercise
Yeah, to do your
for
pass.
my work ready.
Now, Lisa, are we planning the youth water symposium?
We are in the talks about that. We did not budget for that this year, but I've had some conversations with Sarah because it was just too much, last year with COVID.
Yeah, because that's such a great opportunity. That might
Yeah.
be something we
Yeah.
can get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, yeah, but thank you. It was really
Yeah,
nice
of
to
course.
meet you.
Other questions for Kirsten? Greg?
Sure, yeah, great to meet you. Once again, I loved seeing your resume and the application, your enthusiasm, clearly your passion for what you're doing. So I'm hoping there's a way we can keep you involved. And I've often reflected that often I can accomplish more not on a board than I can being on a board.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to make yourself available to Lisa and the board, because my guess is you have skills that they would probably be able to draw from, and as well as some of the other organizations we have in the valley, for, you know, special projects or outreach. And one that I've been talking to Sarah about recently has just been, I know she was teaching a course on leave no trace principles, because we've had such an incredible influx of people into our rivers and riparian areas and our backcountry, and the effect is noticeable and kind of scary for a lot of us who see this influx. And maybe some leave no trace training, you know, put out into the community could be a really valuable thing. And somebody like you could add so much to that, you know, on certainly in the river and riparian, and it's understanding our watersheds. Another anecdote is we've had a longtime fly fishing guide in the community, old friend staying with us. And when we talk about the rivers that he's fishing on, I realize he honestly doesn't know anything about the plumbing of the way these systems work. And most river guides, I'm going to go on a
You should
on
send
the
him out.
limb.
Yeah, there's a lot of plumbing.
Well, some of them do, but a lot of them know nothing. And I keep thinking, wow, what a wasted opportunity. If we could only have the outreach and have, you know, people going out who could help, you know, raise the awareness of just what it is you're doing when you're out fishing on a river, and you know, why do you think the water's this way, or why do you think there's any water at all? You know, all those questions.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's fascinating being in
yeah.
the Frying Pan Valley because, you know, growing up in Arizona, we had the Central Arizona Project Canal. That was actually a major thing, you know, thing that got me interested in hydrology as a kid, is that I was a kid when they brought that pipeline through, and it caused all this buildup of calcium carbonate in the pipes to flush out because the Colorado River water has more sulfates in it. And everybody thought, oh, this river water is so dirty, you know, why did they bring it? It became this whole thing. But, you know, something like the Central Arizona Project is so obvious. You see it on, you know, you can see it on the satellite, you can see it coming across the desert, but you go up and you look at the diversion tunnels at the top of the Frying Pan, and first of all, you can barely find them,
Right.
you know. Yeah, very different plumbing systems, but very little is actually natural these days. And the Frying Pan's raging right now because they're making releases
out.
for Powell and irrigators, but you look at the Roaring Fork and it's not looking so good.
Right, it's a fascinating thing. So I'd encourage you to stay involved, and we're going to figure out a way to keep you engaged somehow.
Yeah.
You can help us work on, you know, I think your watershed really should be part of Pitkin County, so we'll work on that too.
Yeah.
And I'll just jump in here. You know, Kirsten, I encourage you to really just join the board, you know, at their meetings, and feel free to introduce yourself, and, you know, if you're interested in the work, not to be shy about participating. I mean, they're a very collaborative board who I think they're kind of like whoever's heart is in the right place and has, you know, the means
That's a
and
good idea.
willingness to like forward projects. And the board itself is really actively engaged in, you know, a bunch of things I think you might find interesting. For example, you know, watershed management plan development, both the Roaring Fork and Crystal River watershed. And then they are looking to more actively pursue projects, you know, with the purpose of like improving quality and quantity with the funding that goes to that board. And, you know, I think you could really help shepherd some of those ideas. And I think you would find the group like really skilled. So I would encourage that. And then, because our board has no role over staff hiring, we are also hiring staff for our Healthy Rivers and Streams program. So I don't know what the state is of that listing or posting, but maybe keep an eye out on that if that interests you, because we like nothing better than poaching great people from other places. But we have no hiring authority over that, so I feel like I can say that without bias for your interest. Steve.
Hi, good to meet you, Kirsten. And I used to work at Snowmass Ski Area as a snowcat operator and a snowmaker. And while I was snowmaking, I was always thinking about the hydraulics of it and the hydrology and where the water was coming from and where, you know, how long it was going to be there, where it was going to go when it melted. All these thoughts running through my head all night long as a snowmaker. You probably would enjoy that job, doing a working with water job.
You know, Steve, I actually think I know your neighbor, Brian Brown. Yeah, so my boyfriend Sam is a longtime lift electrician at Snowmass with Brian.
Okay. I'm curious about your work on the advisory board for the Biosphere 2. I know that has nothing to do with this, you know, the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, but obviously tracking their water systems in the Biosphere 2 would be critical to the success of it. Could you tell us a little bit about, you know, what your involvement in that project?
Sure. So I got involved with the Biosphere 2 board because I'm a third generation Tucsonan. My parents are both University of Arizona graduates, and my grandfather was a professor of civil engineering there. And my dad was serving on the College of Science Advisory Board at the time. They were looking for new Biosphere 2 board members, and I had just graduated with my PhD, and my dad was talking to then the director of the College of Science, who's now the director of Biosphere 2, Joaquin Ruiz, about you know, just what I was doing, having graduated and stuff. And he said, oh, well, we've got some openings coming up on the Biosphere 2 board if she'd be interested in that. We don't really have a water person or many people from Tucson. Besides that, I grew up literally 10 miles down the road from the Biosphere. So it was kind of a point of interest growing up. It changed hands and who was operating it many times over those years before University of Arizona decided to operate it as a research center. But so Joaquin invited me to join the board, and I've been serving. It's a pretty large board, an advisory board, and basically what we've been doing is trying to field all of Joaquin's kind of out of the box, you know, ideas about what can we do with this facility, and help him operationalize some of those. Think about what would it take to take the Biosphere, which originally was designed to be this contained, could we create a place for life on other planets thing, and really now is being used as a Earth Systems climate lab. You know, because it's this enclosed system, you can do perturbations to the natural system to see, you know, if this is what happens with climate change, what do we see in a closed Earth, you know, atmosphere system like this. And it's not a completely closed atmosphere anymore, but really the major water thing that's been going on there is the ocean. So the ocean is very hard to maintain. It's got this wave generator in it that tries to mimic the actual ocean, and of course the chemistry, trying to get the chemistry of the water to the actual ocean chemistry to have realistic results is difficult, and it tends to get a lot of algae buildup. So in the past 5 years, they've decided we're really going to focus on the ocean environment as a premier research environment at Biosphere 2. We're going to clean it up, we're going to get the chemistry right, and then we're going to start artificially increasing the acidity of the water to mimic the impact of higher CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere on coral, and see if we can breed corals that can survive the higher acidities. So that's the kind of thing they're doing there. And as the advisory board, we're advising them on budgets, you know, their plans for creating revenue through visitorship, and, you know, just like what is the science that we can do with this facility.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting
It's
spot.
actually, that could have applications for trying to save the coral reefs in our oceans here on Earth, our big biosphere.
Exactly, yeah.
So thank you for the insights on that. And I would encourage you to, you know, there is not a position we could appoint you to on the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board right now, but there definitely are other opportunities that others have spoken to. So I would love to have you involved in the community in some aspect. That would be great.
Absolutely.
You know, learning about the biosphere inspired my first grassroots campaign when I was
really?
12. So I was so worried about trash
Oh, yeah.
and styrofoam. And so we collected all the styrofoam in the school for a week from lunch and in garbage bags. And our science teacher let us store them in the classroom and then delivered them to the administration, demanding reusable
Yeah. Nice.
plates and things. I know. No, it really was. It's like this thing that sticks out in my mind. Francie.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten, for your interest and your willingness to serve. It's a really generous way to enter a new community. And I just wanted to let you know that the Board of County Commissioners is in support of the Crystal River Wild and Scenic efforts. So I would sort of guide you in that direction if you are looking for a way to be involved in, as you were saying, most of the water that we get is so artificially moved and delivered that that's one case where it's not. So, you know, I just like to urge you to go that direction and talk to people who are involved with that and see if there's something you can do along those lines, and join, maybe come to the meetings and see what's happening. But, so thank you very much.
Other question? Any last questions for Kirsten?
That was great.
Good.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Great to
We really
meet you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
appreciate
coming.
you.
My kids both live in Snowmass teaching.
Oh, nice.
All
Well, I've probably
right.
seen him in the locker room.
Thanks, I'll be in touch.
Okay.
See you around campus.
So we have a second interview lined up here with a current applicant. You want to go ahead, Lisa, and introduce?
Yeah, you bet. Chris Lemons is our current chair. Chris took over for Dave Nixa, who resigned in 2019 and is filling out Dave's term, and is here to re-interview with the board.
All
I
right,
think
great.
I see him on the screen.
Well, hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your service and for reapplying. Why don't you go ahead and tell us why you want to stay on the board, and then we'll do a round robin of questions from commissioners.
Sure. I'd first like to kind of echo everybody's sentiments. Kirsten's more than welcome to collaborate, join, and, you know, participate as she can with what we're doing. That's super exciting. I guess, you know, quickly, kind of back to what Greg said a minute ago, you know, not all of us are really aware of how the plumbing of this valley works. And my last years on the board have been, just super, super helpful in trying to understand all that. I don't think anybody really, you know, truly understands it 100%, but we're getting better. And I guess that's my main motivation on continuing with the board is, there's a lot of good projects out there, and this year was pretty eye-opening with all the curveballs we were thrown down on the Colorado River, mudslides on the Crystal, and all this kind of you know, natural activity that, you know, we're going to be dealing with in the future. You know, it comes up all the time. You know, everybody says, well, if we get a huge snowpack, you know, that's going to help, but it's hard to count on that. It really is. So, you know, I think looking forward, you know, we just need to start thinking differently about some things. And like I said, that's kind of my motivation to do this. The wild and scenic on the Crystal River is huge. Super excited about that. I mean, that couldn't align more perfectly with our goals, you know. So for me, that's definitely a priority. And I don't know. That's about it. If you guys have questions for me, I'm happy to entertain.
All right, thank you. Questions for Chris? Patty?
Chris, I just want to thank you for stepping in and for chairing this board. This board's come a long way since we first created it. It's fun, it's exciting, and you know we're gearing up to do more and more great things and looking at other issues. I'm going to throw a new one out that came up in a meeting I had not too long ago with Senator Bennett and other entities about what happened in the Colorado. And I just want to plant a seed. If you were to continue to serve on this board, what do you think about our participation in some of the river issues that have been created by the mudslides in the Glenwood Canyon and their downstream effects? And can you think of anything we might be able to do to help?
As far as specific projects, I don't know, but I mean, I think, you know, even though that's, yes, technically out of Pickens County, I think we're all on board with helping out any way we can. You know, we're all in our industry, we're all trying to kind of really figure out what's really going on down there, and you know, we're still trying to figure it out. Just as of the last few days, some guys it's cleared up enough. Some guys have floated down there, and there are some fish. I mean, when it first happened, I mean, we didn't know. You know, there's definitely some mortality. I mean, is it 100%? Is it 50%? Nobody knows. I'm on the board of the Roaring Fork Fishing Guide Alliance as well, and there's been a lot of talk on that. So I guess to answer the question, yeah, I think that would be a huge priority for us.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Did you chair this last year, or was it the year before? You've been the chair recently, haven't you?
He's the chair right now.
You're the chair now?
I'm the chair right now. When did I come on? Was it last fall?
Okay,
In
yeah.
January.
I thought so. I was just thinking, you know, I'm on your list. You know, what are the top issues? Climate change, overuse of the resource. We've kind of discussed that, and then lack of staff. And I'm just wondering, you know, tell us about the bandwidth, the issues that you perceive with the board and the staff. I know Lisa is very responsive and doing what she can. You know, how do you think things are going with, you know, staffing up? Do we have another staffer yet?
It was just posted last Wednesday.
Just posted, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what do you anticipate? What are your hopes for this increased staff position?
Well, yeah, I mean, Lisa does a great job. Lisa's unbelievable, but I mean, that's the reality. We could all use more time, right? It's a volunteer board. And I think, I mean, my excitement for the new staff position is related to, I just think it'll help in developing some of these board-driven projects, right? I think we do a pretty good job, you know, responding to the grant proposals and all that kind of stuff. But I think we could just be more proactive, you know, like I said, with board-driven projects. But the reality is that takes time, and that takes staffing and time. So if we can get that position filled, and you know, at some point sit down and just make a list of our, once again, board-driven priorities, projects we want to pursue, then we've got somebody in place that can really, you know, take the time to take the next steps.
If I could just
Sure.
Follow up on that. I was just thinking about how I've been looking at the dynamics of another board pretty intensely lately, and there's talk of actually bringing and creating committees of specialists or people who are really interested. And I'm thinking about Kirsten, who was just here, and what great skills she has and what interest. Do you think it would work to have committees of non-board members engaged in any of Healthy Rivers activity, and you know, if our charter allowed it? I'm just wondering if you could convene a group of people who really wanted to work but weren't necessarily on the board. It's just a way of leveraging all that talent we have out there. And just let me know if you think it's a good idea. We can always look into it, or what you think about it now. Maybe it's possible. If it's possible, I'd love to consider it. We have some great resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I don't know the ins and outs as far as how things are structured, whether that's doable or not, but we can figure that out pretty easily. But yeah, to your point, I mean, there's people out there that are, pretty passionate, and if they have a little bit of time to commit to this, I'm all for it.
I think we're already doing that with Wild and Scenic.
There's a
The model,
policy committee.
you know.
Is it reporting to Healthy Rivers, or is it independent? I don't know that.
I mean, the Healthy Rivers staff is supporting it, and they're reporting back to the board regularly, just as I'm bringing reports back to you. But it's, people on the Healthy Rivers board, me, staff, Francie, other community
it's happening.
members. Yeah.
Great, excellent.
Francie.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Chris, for your service to the community and the rivers. And I was wondering what you would see as an upcoming project where you'd like to put your attention.
I mean, there's a number of them. I think there's an opportunity to do something. The Phillips property, that's a potential project.
What would you do at the Phillips? What would you do at the Phillips property?
Well, I don't know. It kind of depends on where that goes. But, river restoration enhancement, there's the potential for that type of project there. That's one. We've had a lot of talk about efficiencies in head gates and diversions and things like that. The town of Carbondale, the Beaver Ditch, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if we could, and I don't know how to do it, but if we can, come up with whatever you want to call it, a game plan that you can share with the rest of the state to improve these efficiencies, it's going to not only help our watershed, but overall help out the crisis that we're going to be dealing with. So projects like that. Obviously, there's the Crystal River. Like I said, I think that's a big one to focus our time and energy on right now. Other projects, and a great example is the Robinson Ditch. I mean, I think that's a huge thing. That not only was a river corridor safety issue, but another result of that project is, and we saw it a lot this year, is there's more and more people on the river, and that's not going to change. But projects like that allowed some of that river traffic to spread out, so it wasn't so concentrated on certain stretches of the river. The more you can, and that's back a little bit to the Phillips project, that could help kind of spread some of that river traffic out. Obviously, I'm in the fishing industry, but not necessarily my industry. My industry is part of it, but also the rafting and the kayak community. Just more access to spread everybody out, so we're not all putting in and taking off from the same place at the same time.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for that.
Steve.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for reapplying for the board. I just heard a nuance on there's a Colorado water law application in terms of the water release for the endangered fish species down by Grand Junction that I had never heard before. This was said at the Club 20 meeting, that the water release, like from Root Eye Reservoir, to go down there, the fact that it's going to increase the flows for the endangered fish does not protect the water as it's going down the river. Anybody can use it. Anybody could deplete that water before it even gets there. And the way they protect the water on its way down is they have to run it through the power plant by palisade to make it a beneficial use. So you know, using the water for the hydroelectric production is a beneficial use. Using it for helping the endangered fish species is not a beneficial use, apparently. That makes me start thinking of, are there some ways that we could come up with projects that would protect the environmental uses of the water at the same time as, you know, making sure that water flows down the river and doesn't just get taken out at the next head gate down the river, because a lot of our efforts as commissioners have been to, you know, try to make these incremental gains in keeping some water in the river just for the, you know, improving that health of the river as, you know, going through the county. So that's just food for thought for you to think, you know, maybe think a little differently about potential projects. And you know, there's so many different nuances to water law and whatnot, but you learn so much as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still learning about all that. I have a much better grasp on that, you know, after being on the board. But yeah, to your point, this whole thing's connected. You know, I mean, that water that's coming out of Root Eye for the calls down there for the fish. I mean, it's huge for us. You know, that's not the purpose, but it's massive. You know, 50 CFS that can come out of Root Eye Reservoir, whatever it's for, just really helps out our valley. You know, it cools the river down below the frying pan, you know, to a certain extent. But yeah, that water flow, yeah, I mean, as much of it as we can keep in the river, obviously, is all what we're all striving for.
All right, other questions for Chris?
No, just thanks again, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Lisa.
so much for reapplying, Chris. As I understand it, there's not, the application's closed and there haven't been other District 2 applicants, right?
Right, you interviewed Bill Yocums last week.
For
So
District 5.
Can we really quickly make a decision? Would you?
Yeah, I mean, so Chris, the board, I think we can check in, since there's no other applicants and we were super grateful for you. Does the board feel comfortable confirming Chris's reapplication or reappointment to the board?
I would
Absolutely.
reappoint both of the gentlemen that have applied.
Definitely.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay,
No
as
problem.
well as Bill Yocums,
Thumbs
right?
up.
Yep.
Do we, okay. All right, so Chris, we'll formalize that in a resolution before the board, and we thank you again, and, yeah, cheers, good luck.
Have fun.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Lisa.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, we
Thanks,
are
Lisa.
on to future agendas.
And I will make it easy for you. I do not have anything to bring in front of the board on future agendas today.
Could I ask something?
Yes, of
Just
course.
about next
Greg,
Tuesday,
yeah.
I was struck because the exec session for next Tuesday is identical to today's exec session. And are all the topics still on the list?
Yes, because
didn't
we
finish.
only got to one and we didn't finish it.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
That's all I
It was
needed to
really
know.
productive.
Yeah.
So we can try and assess with John Ely if we think you'll need to be part of it at all, or if you
Or
wanna
I'm
go
gone,
for a bike
if I get
ride.
the morning off again. Yeah, I get a bike ride in.
Yeah.
That's a Bell's ride right there.
All right, Francie.
I was looking on October 13th, which is when I thought we were revisiting Pandora, and I didn't see it on there.
Yeah, we probably have not gotten that on yet, but that is on our radar
That's the
screen.
day, yeah,
Okay.
you're right.
And I think they had to do more formal noticing, so
Yeah.
hopefully.
They,
ComDev,
Being
Oh.
us,
yeah. Yes, they do now. And John, I just wanna make sure we've like scheduled COVID updates.
Yeah, we've got to get those on, I think with
I
Charlotte
see
going
most
this
of
week,
them.
because we don't have
Yeah.
it. I'm going to use some open discussion time
Okay.
to do a quick update, but we'll start building those in.
Okay, and let me just double check, cause we were gonna do a work session on short-term rentals coming up. Is
It's
that
in there.
what Ellen Zisano's noted
It's
for
on
on
the
the
12th.
5th? Oh, it's on the 12th?
I believe.
I see the 5th.
It might be,
I saw it somewhere.
Okay, the 5th, and then first reading is the
Maybe, yeah.
13th. Okay,
it was on there. There was, There was another one, and I can't find it right now, but something I just needed a clarification of what the heck we were talking about. But I'll find it and
Housing, right?
run it by John.
EOTC or housing?
No, you had a question about housing, and I feel
No,
like
that was, Leslie was gonna bring it back to us, but I think it has to do with the fact she's coming in, with a housing issue. But, no, I'll find it and run it by John. It must not be that critically important, I would have made notes all over the page.
John, do you think next Wednesday is going to be as light as listed? I'm just wondering, cause I'm having a childcare, issue.
And
There's
I
no
will not be
school
here.
that day, and you won't be here. So I'm hoping to Zoom, but so I'm thinking I'll Zoom in from home, cause Bridget will be at home with me, she doesn't have school, and we haven't found backup care yet, and Patty was gonna chair
I'm gonna run
in
it, so.
person.
Well, we should add something hard. If,
Just Tuesday,
So if we do think it's
21st
really
or
that
22nd?
easy, then great,
Just
but
keep
if
it-
I don't know, you
yeah.
know.
Keep it really boring, since I'm gonna miss it.
Well,
Anyway,
see,
a heads up if you hear it, that would be
I
helpful.
do think it's gonna be pretty light.
No, because it always makes me look good, so that's fine, we can. Especially if I have one commissioner now that makes it look even better, because we go even faster.
She finishes an
That's
hour
right, I
under
know,
time.
jeez.
I do have a question on the 21st, we're having a discussion on land use fees, options to defray the payment of employee housing impact fees. Is that part, did we bring that up when we passed our new impact fee discussion, that we wanted to have this discussion? Or do we have to reopen that land use
I
code again if we
think-
decide to change it?
Is this the, I'm sorry, Patty, is this the, 80 accessory dwelling
This
unit
is
issue, or?
this is something that, it's an opportunity for people who have to pay, housing, impact fees, employee housing impact fees,
Mhm.
and how they can defray those by doing something else. So are we just opening, it must be its options to defray. So
Yeah,
we must
yeah.
just be bringing that conversation back.
Yeah, and I think it is a conversation actually around going back and how are we checking, because in some cases individuals or families were given an opportunity not to pay
Like to buy down
the
a unit
impact
or.
fee. Sometimes it's because there's a caretaker dwelling unit or something, and are they being used
Okay.
as such?
Or do we
And
wanna
I-
change it?
Yeah.
And that might have come up because I was just wondering if somebody called in after they saw we raised the impact fees and said, what are my options to defray? But it could be all of the above.
Yeah, and I meant CDU instead of ADU. There's so many acronyms, so.
We do that to keep Francie on her toes.
Yeah.
And then we'll
She
throw the
loves 'em.
FAA and the.
That was pretty extreme this morning. One sentence had like 5
I'm just
acronyms
gonna
in it.
start making some up and see.
Well, Francie, when I first got on the board, I asked for a book of all the acronyms at the airport. And I'm like, I couldn't believe they actually had one, let alone what in the heck was I gonna do with that book?
Well, the way they just roll off your tongue, it's just like.
What you should worry about is it's gonna happen to you at some point.
Sometimes when I'm talking to other
They're
people, I'm
speaking
like,
that foreign
oh, I'm so
language."
sorry.
Steve, did you have any questions or comments about future agendas? No, okay. Folks, we're scheduled for a break. Does the board need a break, or would you like a break?
What's our next item? Is it?
Open discussion.
We did have a 2-hour break.
Yeah, I'm okay to keep moving.
I'm okay to keep going.
Okay. You got everything good? Good?
I'm good.
Feel free to go at your leisure if you need. Okay, so then let's move on to open discussion items then.
Yeah, and if it's okay, maybe we'll let Rich go first with the Airport Advisory Committee, and is gonna spend some open discussion time on a COVID update after that.
Okay, let's
Okay.
see if we can get Rich done in 15. I don't know.
That will be entirely up to you.
Okay.
Good, thank you, Board. Rich Engelhardt, Deputy County Manager. We have in front of us today just a brief discussion on where we go next and our next steps with the applications that you all have received for the Airport Advisory Board. So just a little background. First, Resolution 105-2020 was read on second reading on December 16th of 2020. So with that, it repealed the formal appointment of the ASD committee and then appointed an advisory board. And since that time, we have been working on a process to collect those applications. Part of the role of the board is to vet the ALP, the Airport Layout Plan, and also review and give input on future studies, forecasting, emissions, noise reductions. So it's a very, very important board. And with that, you can tell, because you now have 75 applications for this
Oh my
board that
gosh.
come in from different members from up and down the valley here.
Oh my gosh.
Currently, those applications.
Oh, Steve can't hear you.
Oh.
Sorry. Can you hear me, Steve? Okay, we're having a technical issue here. Maybe we
that
will
mic
need that
plugged in?
break.
It's not going, he's also,
Steve,
Can you hear
we
Patty?
can't hear you either,
Is
Steve.
is it this? Needs to go down further?
No, I can't hear Steve either. Steve, say something. Can you? I can't hear.
Steve, talk, does he can't hear any of us?
He
It's
can't hear
Steve
us.
then.
know.
Why don't we go ahead and take that 5-minute break? And we will sort this out and be right back.
Okay.
Well, that was
Seems to be
easy.
in temperament.
Well, there you go.
So we're done.
sorry.
Done, thank you.
I'm not sure about the
Okay, welcome back to the Pickens County BOCC work session on Tuesday, September 14th. We're having a little technical difficulties, but we are improvising and hopefully we'll be successful. So we're picking up on our conversation about the Airport Advisory Board and the enthusiasm of applications we have. So, Rich Englehart, please.
There you go, thank you. And I believe we left off at 75 applicants. And currently we're in the process of taking those applications and redacting any personal information that you all will receive every one of those applications here in the near future. So just a reminder, the makeup of the advisory board is 7 voting members. There's 3 non-voting members, and those are going to be appointed by the municipalities. And then there's also 2 alternates, gosh. But also the board gave the ability to form working groups, so there may be people that don't make this as an opportunity, but could in the future could participate. So a great option that the board added to the bylaws. These are 3-year staggered terms. They must be full-time residents from the Roaring Fork Valley if they're going to be in the voting portion of it, the 7 members. The majority must reside in Pickens County, and then non-full-time residents, as long as they've been here for 3 years, could serve on subcommittees. So again, other opportunities. So with that.
I thought we had some from Down Valley who could come be on the board.
You do. The Roaring Fork Valley is a makeup, but the majority has to be of your 7 members needs to be made up by Pickens County residents.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So describe again just the 3 municipalities have as an ex officio member, but a non-voting member. So
Yes.
they're participating, but they're not voting when
Correct.
it comes down.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it could be a city council or a staff that's appointed by the city.
got it.
Well, where they're headed, the bylaws just talk about staff or somebody that has experience. So in fact, what I understand right now, the municipalities have worked forward. I believe Aspen's going to appoint their city manager, Snowmass city manager, and then BOCC is going to appoint, I believe, their engineer. That's a conversation.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's more staff so that you get away from elected officials having to sit there and get caught in this dilemma of, am I speaking for the board or for the council? And so,
But they could have an
solves it.
elected official if they chose to.
They
I
could
think
have.
their decisions are wise.
Yeah. So with that, there's a couple of options to consider. And number one, one that is always on the table is that you interview all 75 applicants. And as you did today, it takes 15 minutes as a minimum to go through each of those. So that's an option for you as a first step, is to get all those applications. We just find time to get that taken care of for you. Another option would be one that we would suggest that you consider is a kind of a 2-tiered approach. And this is how we set up the visioning committee. The board took all the applications in and they sent in kind of their top tiered votes. And in this case, you can do like 5 tier 1 and 5 tier 2s. You would send those in individually, and if there aren't any crossover of names, then we've got, 50 applicants, so you're down to 50 for there. I would probably surmise that you're gonna have some crossovers. And if you do, then we would just combine those in. If there was one in tier 2 and one in tier 1, we would just combine those together and put them in a tier 1 to bring back to you all for further consideration. So that's one option. And then another option would be to, you as a board, let's say you pick 7 members, is if you were seating that board and you submit those individually. And we go
And you
through the
said
same
what?
process again.
You pick,
would
as
pick-
if you were sitting that board, and then you said,
You just pick 7 members that you, like you were seating the board yourself. You send
Each of
those
us
in
pick 7.
individually, each of you do. We take another look, see how many are combined, and then we come back with those names. So that's another way of, I guess, culling it down in some fashion for you. So, and you may have other ideas, but these are just some suggestions. So you got kind of a 2-tiered approach, or just the top 7, or whatever you would like to do.
Patty?
Yeah, I am sorry to say, but I don't think we can interview all 75 people. I think the way we set up the advisory committees was good. I would suggest more than 10, because we only have 7, oh, sorry, Steve.
Here, I'll just walk around, actually.
We only have 7 positions to fill, so I would suggest we do, some number like maybe 10 tier 1, 10 tier 2, see what the crossovers are, and probably interview 15 people, not just 7, because we're only seating 7. Why would we interview them if we've already picked them? So, just cut it down, or we can discuss a number that everybody else can agree on, but something that makes better sense. But let the board go through, review the applications, pick our 2 tiers of numbers, and then, go from there.
Yeah, and just to make sure I didn't confuse you, on the 7, it's kind of the same approach. It's just not put into a tier 1 or tier 2. Each of you would send in 7 members. We come back again with, could be 35 total, back to you to take another look at.
35 is too many for us to
Okay.
interview.
so we're only seating 7, because the others are appointed.
Plus 2 alternates, so 9.
Where do the alternates fit in?
Those would be part of this, the ones that you all interviewed.
Wait a
Whoever
minute.
didn't make the 7, you could list them as alternates.
Okay.
Okay, what about the 3 ex officios? That's in addition to this 9 then?
Yeah, and the ex officios are gonna come to you
There's
just
12 total.
in a recommendation from each of the 3 municipalities to appoint
Okay.
them.
So there'd be 12 people seated on the board altogether.
Yeah, and 3 of
7 to vote.
those ex officios are non-voting.
Right.
Yeah.
Check
So
in with
we choose
Steve.
9, okay.
Steve, let's check in. I don't know what you've heard.
So, if you want to put the phone by the mic?
Yeah.
So I would want to be able to pick more than 7. We want to pick how many we want to interview, basically. And I think that the idea of interviewing at least 15 for the final, if 15 or perhaps even 20, it depends on how our ranking falls out on the numbers. But I'd say at least 15 that we would actually interview in person would be a minimum. So I like the idea of we each get to pick 10, basically. I wouldn't even call them tier 1 or tier 2. It's just 10 people we would like to interview for the position, our top 10 favorites. Because if there's overlap, which undoubtedly there will be on some, I think that would work. If we don't come up with enough to interview, we might have to do a second round of picking a few more, perhaps having us each pick 5 more possibilities. But we could cross that road when we get to it.
I'm okay
All
with
right,
that.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Greg?
I can agree with it. I just want to make sure if it turns out we have to interview 30 people or 25 people, I'm just thinking that's 2 days, 2 full days of our time or more.
We
to
can cap
accomplish
it
that.
we'll interview X amount, 15, and we'll cap it at 20.
Okay, so 15
Yeah.
is even a pretty large, that's a big time commitment, but maybe that's what it'll take. I did want to ask, I've been approached since the deadline ended by local people who are pilots in the community and longtime aviators who for somehow did not hear about this process, which shocked me. So their question was, is there any chance they can somehow still be involved? So maybe it's on one of the committees you discussed, or, but we're not going to reopen this unless we just simply can't agree. But I have a feeling we're going to find what we need in this group of people.
Yeah, we did have one applicant that had trouble connecting some things to it, so we did include that. We did have one come in late, and we denied it.
Got it.
We did a full court press and getting all that information out there. It was everywhere.
I thought so.
Yeah, so we had to just kind of draw a line, but again, if you want to go back out at some point after you've gone through a process, we can certainly do that. But to your point, yeah, there's going to be other opportunities for them.
Yeah,
They can be involved.
I mean, as a reminder, these are staggered terms, so we will be doing this again next year.
Right.
And I would
For
encourage
that
anybody
first year.
to submit their stuff with a little note. This is for further consideration of opportunities to be involved. Not necessarily applying, they'd have to reapply during another open application for seats, but yeah, just so we have people's names on file.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think what we're hearing is we will compile the notebooks of the 75 applicants, or however many applicants we have there. The board then will be responsible for going through those, selecting your top 10. In my experience, that will probably result in about 15 to 20 names. I think our next step then would be to come back into a work session, and we'll do some sorting and analysis where there's the most overlap and such, and use that work session to call a final list of interviewees, however many that ends up being from that exercise, and then we'll schedule.
we'll
Is
submit
that everyone's understanding?
So we'll submit our 15 that we think are of interest.
10.
10?
10, yeah. You can submit 15, but we'll have to cut 5. Just kidding.
Well, because we're appointing 9, so
Well-
technically we're picking the people we would point 9 people out of.
Yeah, the likelihood that all of you will have the same names. I think that's where the list is going to get generated in terms of additional names.
Right, that's why I'm thinking 15 might be a better number, because we'll probably have more crossovers, and that may give us a list of 15 at the end of the day to interview.
I think that would probably give you a list closer to 30. I think if you do 10 each, what's going to happen is there's going to be probably a list of about 15 to 20 unique names that come out of that.
I'm not
from
saying
all
just
the
one
others.
crossover, I'm saying, okay, this guy had 4 or 5 crossovers, this one had 1.
Right, and we'll do that analysis also.
I think allowing us 10 names out of 75.
Let's try
Up to
it.
the board.
Let's see how it goes, and if it's really a problem, somebody will talk about it.
And I didn't hear the response to what you said about the couple of people who still want to apply. What was the response to that?
We have committees that will be forming that they could still participate on,
I see.
but we're
Okay.
not going to reopen it until we reappoint members,
I'm
probably
sorry.
in a year.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
If the board decides 10's the number we'll submit, bring it on.
Could
Let us
we
start
start
looking.
with 10, and then if
Yeah.
it doesn't work, we'll.
And if
we'll
I put down
bump it up.
20, John can come and speak with me.
They'll get
All right,
You get to
Steve.
interview them all personally.
You guys are going
So,
to dare to lead.
I had
all
a
75
technical
interviews.
problem. I tried to print a copy of the names that came on the, I think it was Google Docs, and I could not print a copy. It would make it so tiny I couldn't read the names.
Where was that? I didn't see that.
Rich sent
So,
it to us.
could you somehow give us a printable copy of the names, just so then we can set up a matrix for, when we're reading the resumes, that we'll have a good way to sort out, to take notes on it, pick the names that we're more impressed with, and that way. It's just a printable version of the names is what I need.
I would suggest we do both. Do you guys want also the applications printed out so you can write on them or not?
I want the application, so
I'd like that.
That'd be
Okay.
awesome.
and
Three.
we had a worksheet
Okay.
that we used for the advisory committee, so we could put the names in comments and stuff. And I was able to print out the information. I had to do it 3 different, because it only printed out
Yeah.
half the page, half the page,
Yeah,
third of the
yeah.
page, third of the page, third of the page.
Okay.
But I figured it out.
Okay, we
Sent
can do that.
yesterday.
So when
can,
would we get those paper copies, though? It would be,
So we're going through a process right now. We've got to go and redact certain information from all 75 of those applications. And Charlotte, of course, is out this week. Her daughter is getting married. And so
so exciting.
we will, why don't we update the board in an email or such when
Yeah.
we expect those to be out, and we'll get them
And
to
then
you.
you'll do an electronic, but you'll also, because I do the paper, put it in like a binder like we did last time, so I can.
Yeah, I
scribble
think
it.
we did binders last time.
Did
We can,
binders.
yeah, for those who want a binder, if you could let us know. And Patty's one.
Yeah, I'm on a binder, so I can earmark
I
and
have
flag
plenty
it.
at home, thank you.
Steve, did you like a binder as well?
If you could do it, well,
We can do both, electronic and a
that
binder
worked,
for
you
you.
know, that really worked for the visioning committee sorting, because you can like separate the papers into different piles while you're reading them. That's one way we can sort them real easily if we do have a paper copy.
I color coded the.
Great.
I think we've sorted that out. We
Okay.
look forward to
Okay.
seeing everyone's applications. Steve, I want to check in. How is this working for you? I'm particularly concerned about the jail planning conversation, if this workaround
As long
is
as
gonna work.
if like I could hear Greg and Rich really well because they were maybe a little closer to the phone. I can hear you pretty well, Kelly. I couldn't hear Patty and Francie as well because and John, because they were all farther away from the phone. Just have the phone at least maybe 3 feet away. I think I'll be fine.
Is there any way we can fix it?
Michaela, yeah,
I can try to call in again on the.
okay, all right. We'll try to have Michaela call in, and maybe we'll just keep moving with open discussion items. Next item, John Peacock.
Yeah, I wanted to give a COVID update. I'm wondering if we should pass Steve down.
Yeah,
until
sure.
we get it on.
Talking stick. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
We need a fancy looking wooden carved stick to mount that phone on so you can hand it.
All right.
to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Okay, I know we don't have too much time, and we will be getting these on our regular agenda. So have a relatively short update for the board today. Just want to give gosh, my comics are getting covered. It's like the best part of the presentation. But the topics, just do a really quick
So
overview.
I think we're good. If
What's
Steve,
that?
Steve, do you want to mute your phone and see if you can hear us on Zoom?
I'll mute.
You can't hear you.
Steve, can you hear us?
Right now?
On-
Can you
What's
hear?
that?
Can you hear us on Zoom? So Steve, we're trying to see if you can hear us on Zoom now. We're recalled in.
Okay, let me put my headphones on.
Okay.
These cartoons. are
Hi,
great.
can you hear us now? Perfect. All right,
We're
we're gonna
back.
hang up the phone then.
Okay. Well, hand.
All right.
All
Thanks for your
right, so do a
dexterity,
quick
Greg.
hit on Matrix. Want to give an update. The Board of Health last week did give direction around an indoor mask mandate, so we'll talk about that. Talk a little bit about vaccines and see if you have any questions. So this is a longitudinal, a little bit different look at our incidence rate, and this was presented at the Board of Health meeting, so Greg and Patty have already seen this. But the really important thing to note is that when we're looking at similar times of year, right now, and this is as of September 7th, 2021, incidentally, our incidence rate as of the 13th is exactly the same, 253.4. Is about 9 times higher than it was September last year. And so we're watching that really, really closely, given how that led into spikes. And we attribute that largely to the more contagious Delta variant. Another change that was significant, and I think weighed heavily with the Board of Health as they were considering the indoor mask mandate question, is that since we have last spoken, the AVH status moved from comfortable to cautious. And some of this is really, judgment calls with AVH and looking at what's happening with hospitals that they regularly transfer to, their admissions, number of staff that are out with COVID-like symptoms. There were a number of factors that played in to the hospital really looking at the data and making a decision to move from that comfortable to cautious. And I think that happened either the day after or the 2 days after our last update. So it's pretty recent. This data is being watched, as we'll talk about in just a minute. Statewide, hospitalizations you can see that since July, they've been going up and are at pretty similar levels to peaks early on in the pandemic throughout the state. And so again, just like we're seeing across the nation with the Delta variant, we are seeing pressure going up on hospitals, certainly not to the level that we were at in the winter when both our incidence rates and hospitalizations across the state, nation, and locally were really peaking. However, I think those concerns, particularly around the changing hospitalization data at the state level and locally, really played a large factor in the Board of Health's considerations of indoor masking. And so on September 9th, the Board of Health did vote unanimously to implement an indoor mask requirement. And really it was delegating to Jordana, our health director, to watch the data, and if the data continued in the concerning trends, to implement a mask mandate that really mirrors to a large degree Boulder County's indoor mask mandate. And so that would require mask wearing in all indoor public spaces for all individuals 2 years and older, regardless of vaccination status. Following CDC comprehensive data tracking system to determine transmission levels and triggers for when that mask mandate would be in place and when it could be removed. And there would be an exemption for facilities that could show that 100% of the people in a space, indoor space together, are fully vaccinated. And so that is something that right now, in the absence of an app or something like has been rolled out in some states, would come in the form of like our business safety plans, where the business would basically apply to public health and say, here's how we're verifying the vaccination status of our workers and patrons coming in. Right now, the Belly Up is an example of a venue that has gone to 100% vaccination status, and they're doing checks right now. In the absence of a statewide system that does that, each entity, private entity, is left to kind of figure out their own way of doing that. But there would be an exemption with public health approval. If hospital capacity continues to be cautious as of tomorrow, the public health order with this indoor mask mandate and these kind of high-level requirements, there will of course be more detail in the order itself, will go into effect Thursday. We have been out doing communications. There was a sector meeting with restaurants, and I believe retail through with ACRA's been working with us on those to let people know that this is likely coming and what the nature of it is. There are different views, as you would expect, expressed in response to a mask mandate coming back in. Some support, some concern. Some people are tired and angry, and so I think in the community, we think we'll get general support for the mask mandate, but I think you can all expect to hear some concerns and complaints coming from the community too. Vaccinations, they continue to be our best path out of the pandemic, at least from what science is telling us. We do know that in Colorado, the unvaccinated currently make up 73.8% of cases. The unvaccinated make up 82.9% of hospitalizations and represent 80% of the deaths from COVID. An advantage outside of the clear health advantages to vaccination is quarantine's not required when a fully vaccinated person is exposed to a positive case. And that, for whether it's a business or an entity, that allows for more continuity of operations when you do have a positive COVID case in touch with some of your employees. Currently, we're showing 85% of the total population of Pickton County, so that is inclusive of 12 and under who cannot get vaccinated, have had at least one dose of vaccine, so that's good. Our data is showing 65% fully vaccinated. We are still checking that with the state. That spread is higher than anywhere else. We suspect that fully vaccinated number is higher than that 65%. We're trying to figure out that what appears to be a data gap with the state data and what we're showing between first and second doses. But what the data shows right now is 85% of our total population with at least one dose and 65% fully vaccinated.
Quick question about that. What is taking out the under 12 due to that percent number?
I was afraid you're going to ask that as a math teacher at one point, and I will need to dig up those numbers. It would, if we did it just as a matter of eligible population, I suspect that first dose is going to be in the mid-90s, and the 65% is probably going to inch up closer to the 70, but we'll need to get some real data.
The bigger question is, do we have any idea what percentage of our population is under 12?
That's the
basic. We do have census data that we can pull. I just don't have it in front of me. Yeah.
And do we know what percent of the people who have been tested positive are sick?
With serious illness?
With symptoms, significant symptoms.
It's higher in Pickton County than it is in the state. And again, we do have that data, I just don't have it in front of me, so I can get that in a future update.
Okay.
Around vaccines, you probably saw last week that President Biden announced a vaccine mandate. That vaccine mandate will include local governments, basically any employer with 100 or more employees. Details of that mandate are not out yet. They'll be forthcoming. We expect that they'll probably come in the form of an emergency temporary standard. I didn't use the acronym. Through OSHA. Those will probably be out in the next few weeks, and those typically allow anywhere from 50 to 90 days for implementation. So we're still waiting to see how that mandate is going to come down. What the specifics around the mandate end up being, and also, you know, we anticipate that there will be some challenges to that. In the meantime, we have implemented an incentive, a vaccine incentive. That portal went live earlier this week, actually just yesterday. Yesterday it went live, and we have already had 106 employees complete that, so I think we're going to get a good response to that. The deadline for that is November 5th, so we got a lot of time still. And so we will, I think, be in good shape once we know what the nature of the mandate is, to know where our affected departments are, who our affected employees might be, and if and how many would fall under any exceptions that will be in that mandate. So I think we're positioning ourselves well to respond quickly to that. And that was the quick hit.
All right, questions, Greg?
Well, the sad news is that we've had another fatality in the community due to COVID, and I'm wondering what you can share about that.
You know, Greg, I don't think I know a whole lot more than you do at this point. My understanding is we do have someone who was fully vaccinated, but was an older member of our community. And I think more will be coming out on that, but I don't know a whole lot more about it than you. You may even know more than I do about it at this point, but we are expecting that.
Fully vaccinated and then tested positive again?
Mm-hmm. We've had, there are breakthrough cases.
Yeah, I know that. I just was wondering if they were just saying, well, he's fully vaccinated. I mean, I wanted, anyway.
Yeah, so we'll get more details, but our understanding is that it was an elderly member of our community that contracted, and that's why the indoor masking, even amongst the vaccinated right now, is still important. Still have vulnerable populations.
Oh, that's awful.
And we're going to know, we've had some media inquiries about, you know, when is this going to happen, and it will happen after the AVH consultation with Public Health Director tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow, and would be effective Thursday, and
Right.
so the public health order for an indoor mask mandate has been drafted. It is ready to go. It would need to be signed, and per the discussion with the Board of Health, the direction was to continue to watch that hospitalization data, and then to have the health director issue the public health order with the indoor mask mandate if we remained cautious.
Yeah, Patty.
Do we have any idea how many local businesses are already requiring vaccinations for their employees outside of government?
You know, we know about healthcare workers. We've heard, I've only heard of one other major employer requiring outside of healthcare at this point. I think mostly it's been incentive and education.
And outside of school systems?
Yeah.
Like private entities, okay.
Thank you for sharing. Gosh, thinking about that family, and thanks for your tough decision last week. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but I support you.
It was thank you, I appreciate that. I think the whole board feels the weight of that, but I think we also felt it was necessary. You know, it was pretty unequivocally necessary.
And I think looking at what Boulder did was key too.
It's nice when you have other communities leading, and it's not us doing the out on the bleeding
Boulder and
edge.
who else?
San Miguel has
was it San Miguel?
mandate, and San Juan has an advisory.
They have some significant issues going on over
Right.
there. Okay. So
All
you'll let
right.
us know tomorrow, John? Send us an email and keep us updated as to whether or not masks.
Yeah,
will
as
be
we
required on
learn
Thursday.
more, I just learned about it myself and didn't have any details, so.
Got it.
And I think there already was a press release that just went out in this meeting about
okay.
anticipating the mask mandate anyway, not
Yeah.
about our new laws.
Okay,
John, good job.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, and I think we're on track, we're on time. How about
Actually,
that?
a minute early, Kelly.
All right, it's so nice to see our public safety folks here. Sheriff Joe DeSalvo. Alex, you want to join us, or you're cool back there? Okay, sir.
I'll join in.
Okay.
He's so shy.
He is, he's not unlike me.
Unlike you?
No.
Unlike me?
Not like you either, Patty.
Joe, I've been thinking about you. I've been hitting balls at the golf course.
Yeah,
I'm doing pretty good.
Are you working on your cursing while you're out there?
Oh, I don't need work on that.
That's really what golf is. You just go to work on your cursing.
All right, so I'll turn it over to John Peacock and Joe DeSalvo to talk about jail future planning.
All right, and Joe, do you want me to kick this off, or?
I'd love for you to kick it off.
Okay, great. So we're here to talk a little bit about the next phase of jail planning. As the board is aware, we're doing some short-term safety improvements right now, with the idea of buying time for us to have this longer-term planning discussion. And the longer term discussion is really about thinking about the jail in terms of its role in a complex criminal justice system, and really looking at how the criminal justice system in Pickens County and the 9th Judicial District develops and implements policies and procedures that directly influence the need for jail beds. And so really when we look at jail planning and system planning really should occur together. When you just look at the facility in a vacuum, you're probably not really getting the full picture, and worse, you may be looking at building capacity that doesn't do the best job of serving the community, serving public safety, reducing recidivism, and improving really public safety in the best and most cost-effective way possible. And so really what we're looking at is how do we ensure that we're taking into account the full continuum of alternatives to jail, making sure that we're making wise investments that really help reintegrate folks successfully into the community, versus really identifying those that need to be in a detention facility for public safety reasons. Pickens County has always been a leader in these practices, and regionally has been a leader in these practices. I think, my own personal view looking at it, that leadership evolved organically with a lot of really motivated and passionate individuals over the years, and hasn't necessarily been implemented systematically and into the system. And that's just my assessment right now. And so as we're looking at the needs for the jail, we really want to approach it in a way that looks systemically at the criminal justice system, and really involves the many partners and decision makers that influence that system to make sure that we're implementing evidence-based practices that lower recidivism, protect public safety, and are financially responsible. And so as we've been planning for this next phase of the jail planning project, we've been thinking about how do we bring stakeholders to the table to be part of that conversation and have the breadth of policy discussion. I know in your memo there was an attachment that had different stakeholder groups, and what we're really focused on talking to the board about today is the creation of a Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. We'd see that coming under invitation of the sheriff and the Board of Commissioners as a group of key stakeholders and decision makers, particularly in the 9th Judicial District and the criminal justice system in Pickens County, that can work together to identify those evidence-based best practices, what the continuums need to be for our community, and then finally where the jail fits into that and where any future jail projects or facilities projects fit into that continuum. This is a really complex system, and it's set up in a way that you have a lot of adversarial players, right? And players that need to keep a degree of arm's length from each other. And also all the decisions of one stakeholder tend to affect the decisions of another. You know, how a DA approaches their job versus how a judge uses bond schedules or those sorts of things, or alternative sentencing programs. All of that has to work together, and we have to maintain those checks and balances within the system. And so it is a fairly nuanced kind of conversation that needs to happen. What we would look at is creating this stakeholder group, advisory group, to really provide that nuanced and conversation and a forum for not only jail planning, but really to act as a center of ongoing data tracking, system monitoring, policy review, and program implementation ongoing in Pickens County, so that we're not relying organically for people with passion, which is great, we still want that, but that we're also building systems and consistency. And so with that, we've proposed a membership, and we really want to do a check-in with the board, because we had anticipate that this group would be making recommendations that will affect what could be major decisions for this board around budget for future jail facilities and or investment in alternative types of programs for those who are interacting with the criminal justice system here. And so with that, we did a stakeholder analysis and thought about the different voices that really directly influence that experience, and have recommended a criminal justice coordinating committee made up of the sheriff, undersheriff, jail commander, a representative from the board. We've either, it says chairperson here, but I think any representative from the board, because the chair may have their hands full with a lot of stuff, and this would be an ongoing committee, and you'd probably want some continuity there. We would like to invite the chief judge of the 9th Judicial District or another representative of the chief judge's choosing, district attorney, public defender, a police chief representative, Pickens County Human Services representative, public health, particularly our mental health function out of public health, my office, somebody from my office, and then an at-large citizen to provide the, a different perspective. This is a lot of voices to try and coordinate, but you have advocacy from different areas of the criminal justice system in Pickens County. This would be supported through a contract that we've recently entered into with. We had generically criminal justice planners in here, and it just so happens the firm we hired is called Justice Planners, so it's a little confusing there. But we selected this group because of their experience and their ability to bring background to the table about best practices on alternatives, and the expertise that they have in areas such as pretrial services, early case resolution, program alternatives that may allow for diversion from jail, both pre and post sentence, which is going to be important to know what our facility needs are. So I'll take a breath now, and I know Kelly had also sent out information, I think based on a lot of research that Kelly's been doing about similar kind of community involvement opportunities. We think if we can get this type of group together to begin looking at systematically our programs, gaps, and facility needs, we would have the right voices at the table to make a good recommendation back to the board.
John, can I jump in for just
Please.
a minute, please? So, you know, Kelly, John said, I know you did a lot of research on this, and we really appreciate that you're looking into this. And so I kind of did my own, and that took 24 years. When I first started working for Bob Broadus, he was the one who was in charge of constructing that jail. He was the undersheriff or director of operations at the time under Dick Keenest, is how that jail got built. So I'm clearly familiar with it, how it got there, and what the process was like back in 1984, because I talked to Bob about it over the 24 years I worked with him, so I was familiar what this process was. Back then, I think they wanted the same things we want right now. They wanted a very progressive jail, something that was different than anything else made in the country, certainly at the time that was, with a lot of alternative program, reduce recidivism, and make it what we used to call it as a community jail. Limit the amount of change that someone experiences when they're in jail, so they could go back into the community and function properly. Keep in mind, back then, we were having 30 or 60-day stays, so it was easy not to get somebody institutionalized. Now we're having 3-year stays, and we've got people that are fully institutionalized, or they came in institutionalized. And I still want, I think one of my North Stars on this is going to be to try and make it as progressive as possible. But keep in mind, what I remember hearing from Bob, and I brought this up recently, was it can't be everything to everybody. This is not going to solve the community's problems just because it's a jail. It can't be a drug rehab. It can't be a mental health facility. It can't be a suicide prevention building. It can't be, you know, whatever. So I think we have to keep in mind that the main point to the jail is to separate predator from prey and to incarcerate people based on what the courts tell us. So I think the only thing I would add, because I'm optimistic that we're going to come to an agreement with a great facility, but I think we got to keep our expectations reasonable as what we could do for the entire community. I mean, recently somebody had brought up the idea that why don't we use it as the new homeless facility. It's not made for that. It's a jail. And it works under a different set of parameters than that does. So with that in mind, I just want to tell you my perspective on this, that I'm not looking for the Larimer County Jail, with no disrespect to Justin Smith, who actually does have a very progressive jail. But I am looking for something that's progressive, but we also have to keep in mind it's where we incarcerate people.
So really what we're looking for from the board today, and that we could have easily made invitations and brought a group together like this already to start conversations and get input, but we wanted to make sure that from the board's perspective, we're inviting the right people to the table in order to come up with good recommendations. We'd also like to get some input on whether we should have a Board of Commissioners representative and who that should be. And then we'd probably want to bring back to the board some thoughts on a citizen appointee for that, or get some input. So those are really, we want to make sure that if we're going to create an advisory group, that it's going to have a makeup that's credible with all of you before we invite people to the table.
Questions for Joe and John? I see all sorts of hands. So I'm going to go left to right. So I'll go Patty, Steve, and then Greg.
Well, I want to thank you guys for this effort. It's we're just beginning. We've got a ways to go. I want to thank Kelly for her very extensive email and thought process, and I read it all and made lots of comments. So about the data collection, and we can discuss that at another time. I think setting up a group, I think that making a determination. As far as a local citizen, I don't have a problem with that. I think that would be a wise thing. And with the 9th Judicial, I'm hoping that, I know Erin Ely is retiring, but she has put in a lot of thought and effort, and I think she would be a key person that I would want to see part of this planning
Who
process.
did you say?
Erin Ely, Judge Ely, who's retiring next month. But I think that I want to just throw that out there. Kelly and I had been talking briefly about trying to go see some other jails, and maybe that's something we can continue to work on. As far as a member of the board, yes, I think there should be somebody there. I can tell you right now, if I am taking on the role of chair next year, I will not have time to do this. I've already been advised by my mental health therapist, John Peacock, to not take on anything more for next year because I've got a lot already on the plate. And I'm going to, hopefully Kelly will jump in on that because she's done so much homework. She really has gotten into this issue, and she's been a great advisor to the BOCC, and I want her to continue in that role. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I think, you know, it's timely. We need to get a plan going here to address our issues with the Garfield County Jail, but I don't want to rush it. I think our first steps are in the process as far as what we can do at the jail now, which I think is huge first steps. So I want to make sure at the end of the day, we do have a jail that works for the community as a whole, and we can't do it all, so let's do what we do as best we can, or better. So that's where I am right now at this time, and thank you again for this effort. It's more than appreciated.
All right, Steve?
I was thinking mostly about how would we pick a Pitkin County citizen to be on the board, given that we just went through this process of having people apply for the Airport Advisory Board. And a couple of thoughts on that. Maybe we do put it out to the public. If you're interested, you could apply for it. We might want to have two citizens, one who has been incarcerated at the Pitkin County Jail and is done with their, you know, they got out, they're a good citizen now, they you know, changed their lives, whatever. They did their time, they're no longer in the legal system. That might be one person we would want to have advising on the jail. And we might want another, we actually might want two citizens, the second citizen being someone who has not been in jail, just a good, you know, upstanding, involved public person from our community. And in terms of a commissioner, I would suggest Kelly would be a good candidate for it, given all the work she's put into this already. She is still chairperson now, but she won't be for very much longer, and then going into next year,
Thank God.
She'll have all that time.
Compared to now.
Thanks,
so,
Kelly.
just a thought.
Thanks, Steve. Greg, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, just looking at the list, whenever I see a committee that has so many different people on it, I wonder if it's going to be so large and cumbersome that, maybe necessarily it's going to move pretty slowly, and I'm always tempted to try to figure out how to make it smaller, just so it can be a bit more efficient. But while I said that, I was thinking, what about, client representatives? I see we've got a lot of county, human services and county people on here, but would it make sense to have somebody who's in criminal defense outside the county structure as part of this? Maybe that's the citizen board member as someone like that. What parts of our community do the clients, do the inmates, the jail come from, and is there value in looking toward, so I was thinking, that's where I thought maybe an outside criminal defense attorney.
Greg, just a quick clarification, that would be the public defender.
That's the public defender okay, so that's going to be
attorney for people who can't afford.
I wasn't sure if there was an official list of public defenders, or do all criminal defense lawyers in Aspen?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are public defenders that work for the state of Colorado, and we actually have one in mind that I won't say their name that I think would be perfect for this job.
And they're a state employee then? Okay. Let's see. I appreciate what you said about it can't be everything to everybody. And I think that, for instance, if we have someone who's tuned in with our homeless population, which could provide a disproportionate number of inmates at the jail, they should be part of this conversation, I think. They may have some insight, and maybe that comes from human services through the county, or it comes from the homeless shelter. So those were really the suggestions I had, is where might we find people who have some special insight to the people who are going to be inhabiting the jail outside of our loop, the loop that you're in every day. And I'm naive enough about it not to know just how insular the county and the sheriff's office are. So that's my own naivete, but just wondering, is there anybody else who should be at the table? And then regarding the system itself, when it comes down to it, you're hopefully going to have people like nutrition and fitness consultants and, people who can really help people rehabilitate as best they can, or survive when they're inside the jail. So, people who understand how to bring somebody back into the workforce. So I'm not sure where they lie within this list, and maybe they're there, but those are the things that came to mind. Other than that, I'm fine with it. And after making those suggestions, I'd say, how do you make it shorter?
Yeah. Like he wants to make it shorter.
And if I could respond just real quickly, what I didn't go over is that there is going to be subject matter experts that get brought to the table, Greg, that I think will address a lot of those concerns. And so we would imagine, a regional mental health substance abuse provider being able to provide data and input, our jail-based behavioral services provider, our jail medical provider, the hospital medical provider, pre-hospital medical provider. There's a lot of subject matter experts that may not be part of that longitudinal discussion that a criminal justice advisory committee, now I forgot what we're calling it, but
coordinating. A lot of acronyms.
Coordinating committee. They probably wouldn't be in those longitudinal, but I think to your point, can come in at key points in the conversation to draw expertise. So we did anticipate that. It's a little bit farther down in the
I see it. Okay.
attachment.
Great. All right. Thank you. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Nancy, did you have questions?
Yeah, well, thank you, Kelly, for this work that you've done. It's really great. And I was so excited when John was talking about this, when the jail came up in February at our retreat. And I'm so thrilled that it's back on the table, full on here. And Kelly, if you want to do this, I would support you 100%. And if you don't, I'd do it. Just so you know, I'd make myself available. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, you know, I feel like we got off to a rough start on our initial conversations, and so this just sort of inspired me to like think through, like, what do I feel like I need, you know, to understand and to know, and my own gaps of information, and who, you know, I just personally would hope to inform the conversation at the table, and so that's why I kind of articulated all that for your consideration, because I'm only one person, and you know, our board has to like give that direction. But as you all know, I will advocate for what I think. So, but I'm really pleased with how the work that you all have done over the summer has shaped up, and I really have never had any doubt that I think we'll end up in a place that reflects all of our shared values. And I hear Joe's comment that this, you know, the jail can't be all things to all people. I will expect that we're actually going to create more work and more programs for ourselves, like as the BOCC, quite possibly separate from the jail. And I think my hope is, you know, how do we keep people out of the jail and give them other services that have nothing to do with the jail, you know, and then design a facility for the people who do need to really be in jail, and so that the jail is not what it is now, which is being all things to all people because it's the only place to land. You know, I'm hopeful that we craft other programs that give people safer and more appropriate places for them to land based on their needs, and that this kind of exploration of what you all already know and I'm prepared to learn a lot about will reveal. And so I think I'm not totally clear on what is envisioned for how these different groups interact with each other, as far as the, you know, planning group and the coordinating committee and the expertise group, and then I forget what the fourth one is. But, you know, I think, I know for me, I'll probably be very focused on kind of like diversion programs. And again, what are those programs that are getting people out of the jail? And so, if that is represented by the coordinating committee, great. I'm not seeing necessarily where that's coming forward, where that expertise necessarily is coming all forward, or if that's the combination of expertise reflected by the mental health, human services, justice folks, and the courts. So.
Yeah, and Kelly, I mean, we're not even crawling yet. We're still embryonic almost in this. You know, diversion and programs like that, that's not really a jail-based problem or issue. That's the district attorney and how many people he wants to divert from jail. So that's where that would come in. I think based on what you said, one of the programs that we have here that's never going to go away is work release. That's the best way to keep somebody earning their living, you know, being able to care for their family while they're doing a 30, 60, whatever day work release sentence. So that's never going to go away. I'm very proud to say that I think that before we closed the jail, we did have a lot of programs for people. And as Kim Valerio has said, Garfield County has almost twice as many as we have. So we may have to piggyback off some of their programs and see what they have that we could now use that we don't even know about, for example. But prison fellowship, different denominations for worship, AA, NA, programs like that. I could probably name a lot of jails in Colorado that don't even have AA, which is, you would think, NA or NA would be at the top of the list to keep people from repeating their offenses. So I'm all over what you just said, and I think that we're going to come back with a lot of different things. And how did it start? It starts the same way when John and I were on the committee to build this building. I mean, it's a vacant plot of land, and we met weekly, and it was arduous for a long time. At the beginning, I don't even think it was, no one really knew what we were doing. And, you know, that's the same way maybe you don't.
Oh yeah, I'm comfortable in that space.
We knew what you were doing, but we just wanted to stay
2 or
out
3
of it.
months of this, you're going to learn real fast.
Well, thanks.
And Kelly, one of the things, that's one of the reasons that we're bringing justice planners on board is to start to give us kind of a view of what are best practices for diversion, for making sure only the people that really need to be in jail are in jail, and what's working in other communities, and evaluating our current portfolio and utilization of programs for us to have a starting point, and then to be able to talk about what are the barriers at different points in and amongst the different entities responsible for the system, for why isn't something happening, or why is something happening more here than somewhere else that we want to either encourage or prevent. And so that's where some of that expertise will come in.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I have to say, I didn't love the other consultants, so some of the choice of language, just talking about, our inmates, really, I felt like was placing them as like the other, as opposed to like members of our community, which is how we truly think of them all.
Well, Alan,
so,
I felt comfortable with Alan. I have to prepare you in advance. His presentation will overwhelm you. The statistics that we're all wanting to hear about, average daily population, length of stay, all the things that are concerns are things he's working on now. And I forgot his due date. February? January?
Didn't I miss the last meeting? I think I was out.
February-ish.
Yeah.
We'll get a whole snapshot of what. Now, I also want to keep in mind that our records system is really only 3 or 4 years old. We're not going to be able to go back 15 years and give you guys information from them. Our records management system was only adopted after I became sheriff.
She actually asked for some 30 years back. I have that noted.
Oh, I did.
I don't want to look at your garage, Patty. I'm sure you have
find a
things
good
in there
archivist.
from your first go-around. So I
That's
think
interesting.
we'll
Like
have
the state doesn't require those or keep related data for county jails?
I don't know that this is the place for that, but yes. We do purge records regularly. But I've noticed, just as a quick analogy, we did have a problem with a vendor 10 years ago with our records management system, and we lost a lot of records. So sometimes it's the vendor, sometimes it's the vendor we choose, sometimes we're just not doing a good job at it. But I'll defer that to one of our meetings.
And I should note, we have not talked to or invited folks to the table yet. We wanted to have this conversation with the board first, because if we were really on the wrong track, we didn't want to start to form the committee. So with the thumbs up, roughly, we would start putting the committee together along these general lines.
And
so
when do you want to bring us into that? After you put it together, or when you have a drafted version and then have us see it and make changes if need be, rather than have you say, here's your committee, this has been our decision, or
I would really encourage this board, when we're asking for representatives from the 9th Judicial District and District Attorney and public defenders, to allow some discretion for those groups to give us some names of folks who can really participate and such. And then we didn't envision that this would be appointed as a formal committee, but it'd be more coming back and saying, look, from the entities that we wanted to have representation from, here's who we have. And then it sounds like, Kelly, it sounds like you've got a nomination. I don't know if you've accepted yet, but there's that.
I'd like to do this.
As vice chair, I'm going to appoint her to this committee.
Yeah. Then the big question, I think, is the one Steve was asking, which is, if we're going to have a citizen representative, do you want that to be, a recommendation emerging from the project group? Do you want to have an application process?
I think a recommendation, and I would like to ask, if we have some ideas of people we might want, if we can submit those names through John just for consideration. We may all be on the same page, but we may be thinking of something that works for you and works for us, or we may be totally out in left field. So, but I'd like to be able to do that if names came up or thoughts came up, to submit it. But you guys have been doing this, and we also have this other big committee we're trying to appoint with 75 applications. So, yeah, so I think we need to get moving on to this, and we may be adding and subtracting people. I think we should let people know this is a first blush. We may find that committee is too big to be workable, and we want to split it out, or we may find we need to add. So we need to, anybody who's involved needs to understand that it may be morphing as we go along.
And some of the most successful citizen members I've ever seen are people that really know nothing about the project itself. That are just really good, smart, engaged citizens who know the community, know what the community needs are, and what the jail reflects our population as a community. So sometimes it's best to have a really smart person who doesn't have a lot of subject matter expertise.
They learn as they go along and bring.
Well, you got her.
I was gonna say, that's my job, actually.
We have a sister, we need one more person.
Okay, so other comments on the request of whether we would vet names for the community or go through an appointment process?
I'm comfortable either way. Honestly, I'm feeling very trusting of what you've done so far and how you're proceeding, and I'm hoping it's not too cumbersome, but it's good to start with a broad cloth. I just wanted to get to the jail tour schedule for Patty and Kelly. I was thinking we could send them on a junket and like hit 10 or 15 jails across the South.
The problem is we might get into one they don't let us out.
Yeah.
We are finding there are some.
I've avoided it for 43 years, so.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry, John.
But we may be able to get, through the consultants that we have hired, they may be able to recommend, some communities that they think do have these best practices, because it's not just about the jail, right? It's about the alternative, but what I'm hearing a lot of conversation about is, what are our alternatives? What are we wrapping our community members with that have gotten into trouble? That's why I'm hearing a lot of interest in, and so it may be more that going to a place where those systems, what relationships need to be in place? How are they funded? What do the partnerships look like? I'm kind of wondering if more than a jail, that's what I'm hearing this board's interest is. Sorry, Francie, I think I cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. I just wanted to say that after we get through the airport thing, it might not be bad to put another volunteer opportunity out there to the public, because there'll be people who really care about being involved in this community who offered to be part of the airport advisory committee, but that's what it's called this time. But they weren't chosen, so this might be a way to draw in, just put out that we have another opportunity for people. It could be cumbersome and take too much time, but anyway, just a thought.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that, but I think we need to see how it goes, and we may find that we have a good broad-based representation, and we may find that that's a gap, and then we can put it out there. But I think the people that applied for the airport committee have one perspective in mind, and they'll probably be afraid we might lock some of them up in our own facility on the way.
Well, and I just want to articulate sort of what I'm thinking going into this is, they're given all the different groups to be able to draw on, that there is some like fluidity and like iterative process here about the voices, that the committee can say, oh, we need to hear more of these voices, or we haven't quite found the right fit there to kind of pull in more people. That's what I'm expecting anyway.
As a
That's where I think-
61-year-old person, I would like to see some youth in this, and I don't know if that's a popular thing to say or not, but.
We probably have a lot of youth that would fit right.
Well, I'm youthful, but it would be great to have somebody who's just starting their life here, and they're gonna figure out what the jail for their, hopefully not, their children might look like. I mean, frankly, we've been around a long time. We need maybe some
Fresh blood.
perspectives on this.
If I could, I was just going to say that the one thing I think should be involved every step of the way is the economist and the financial reality person. And I'm sure you all play that role in your various roles, but I just want to make sure that that's
Maybe
you
an
know.
FAB member?
Well,
If
and
we
I
wanna-
think that's part of the reason I'm there.
Oh, yeah,
is
good
To
point.
be the budgetary perspective, because I'm not a justice system expert in any way, but I have a pretty good view of county finances, and so
Right.
that's, I get to play a little bit of that party pooper role at the end of the day.
The numbers
Okay.
guy over there.
All right.
All right, well,
Okay,
thank
I
you. I
think we
feel
can-
heartened about this, and I look
I'm
forward
sorry,
to, I
Kelly?
said I feel heartened about
Okay.
all this. I look forward to working with you, Joe, and your colleagues and staff.
Yeah.
Other
Okay.
questions or
Oh,
thoughts?
Steve's got
Jared?
something
Oh,
for you.
Steve,
Kelly.
go ahead.
Well, one last thought. Francie mentioned, we talked about this at the retreat last February. And I remember when I first became a commissioner, I thought we would have an airport runway, a new airport runway built within at least a year of when I became commissioner. You find out quickly that these big projects take a lot of time and a lot of planning. They don't happen immediately, and it really takes a lot of effort by the community to get them done. So I'm glad we're making progress on this now, and it will get done, Francie.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank
Good to
you
see
all.
Thanks,
Good
Joey. Nice to see you.
Alex.
Good to see you too.
Thanks, Joey. Nice to see you again.
And
Seems like I just saw you.
Yes, 12 hours ago.
Thanks, Joey.
Well,
24.
before
Thank you,
we
Francie.
fully adjourn, I realized I didn't quite do the check-in if board members had any open discussion. So I want to.
I'll just let you guys know while they're chatting. I'm going to be out the first week of November. Hopefully just the first week of November.
Okay.
But I'll let Charlotte know
Okay.
for
Great.
sure. I'm going to try and work the election the week before that because the election is
Oh, yeah.
November 2nd. And then we're watching to see what happens in California today.
Oh yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
we
no
all can
kidding.
work the election. There's not a
Not a
county question on
question.
it or candidates. Steve.
I just wanted to give a brief report on where I was today.
I was going to
I
ask.
was at a meeting in Washington, D.C. So I have been appointed to the National Advisory Board of the Elected Officials Protecting America, which is largely made up of veterans who are elected officials, who are concerned, the organization is concerned about three main items: the climate emergency, land and water protection, and environmental and economic justice. And so today we had the first part, we were meeting with a couple of officials from Biden's White House who were involved in environmental issues. And the second part was the first meeting of the National Advisory Board, all having a Zoom meeting with elected officials from all across the country. It is a very engaged group and very, very interesting. We had just amazing discussions coming right out of the gates. And there were three people who were there from Colorado besides myself. One was Senator Faith Winter and State Representative Meg Froelich were both in on the White House part of the meeting. They're not on the National Council. But then a local resident, Nicole Tuhick,
She's
is
a local girl.
on the development. She works for the organization Elected Officials Protecting America as their development director. So it's a pleasure. I've never met her in person, but I'm going to meet with her shortly, and we met on the Zoom call today.
She grew up in the
That's what I
trailer
was up
court.
to for a couple of hours.
She grew up where?
In the smuggler trailer court.
No?
Great.
Well, thanks, Steve. I was curious, so appreciate the report out.
I have a
Patty.
question. Steve, how much time commitment is this gonna take? Cause you know, we have a lot coming up on our agendas. So, it'd be great if you could go to Washington, but it's nice that you can just zoom in. But what is the time commitment so we know how to either expect you at the table or to not?
Well, I think the meetings won't be more than once a month kind of meetings. than that. I had spent some time up till now. I've been on 2 different press conferences, but it's all been Zoom meetings to date. And given that everybody's spread clear across the country, I think it will continue being that. I will have to spend some more individual time just on contacting people in Colorado and, you know, kind of being involved in publicity about the organization.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, but I just am concerned if they're scheduled on Tuesdays, we may need to look at your time so we don't schedule really critical issues on our Tuesday work sessions or on Wednesdays when we really need to have a full board here. So let's see what we can do, I think, to work with you.
Yeah, I hear you, and I will definitely put in requests for when they're planning times to have it. The other things I've done have been on Thursdays, so that worked out fine up till now.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, I appreciate it.
Any other open discussion items?
Only that, if I could just, thinking about the pass. I was up the pass over the weekend, went for a big walk up in the high country. And the stoplights on the pass, it'd be great to just keep track of what will become of the stoplights that they've installed on the pass. I could see it being temporary and becoming permanent very easily. And I'm just wondering, I'd like someone to keep on top of that. Maybe Brian is. He's probably on top of that, but at some point it'd be great to have a report, because I hear from the community, some like it and some don't. And I'd like to know what people think about it, and if it's going to be here, if this is the new reality with the big fat cars.
Well, I've been up there and I think it's awesome. I mean, people feel so much safer. I'm not talking about myself or people like you, people who drive it all the time. People who don't drive the pass all the time, they just get so terrified in those 2 places, and this seems to make them feel so much safer. It seems to make the whole thing
more attractive,
more reasonable, you know.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people too that they think it. I haven't heard from people who don't like it, but you know, it just seems kind of weird to have a traffic signal on Independence Pass. You're going up in this beautiful wilderness area and you've got a traffic signal. But that being said, I think Brian's the best contact, but it's up to CDOT at the end of the day, but we can definitely be part of the conversation.
Great, that's it for me.
Okay, I just have a question about Saturday.
Yes.
What if we decided for transportation? Are you riding your bike?
No,
Are we
again,
riding
we're
bikes?
meeting at Public Works at 10 o'clock to take a van unless you want to ride your bike.
That's what I was wondering.
Part of the
Who's riding bikes?
conversation is going to be in the van as we're driving up there, so we can talk about things. So that's the bonus of riding in the van. Plus, it's a site visit, and Brian will be recording it for the public record. Sorry, Kelly, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, you gave more detail than I think I knew, so thank you.
You know, if I could add
Yes.
something to that, 2 of the important elements, I think, of that whole visit would be the perspective one has from being on a bicycle and part of a bike group, or being on the bus. And it doesn't sound like we're going to get that from the solution we have is keeping us in a private van. So I'm not really convinced that it's going to achieve the result that I was hoping for. But Brian has an agenda there, and I'm happy to go along. But I think having the perspective as you're out there on the road, whether you're walking or riding an e-bike or riding a bus or riding a bicycle, is probably pretty valuable. And so I'd encourage people to get that somehow.
Well,
Well,
I
why
think
don't you
riding
ride
in
your
the
bike?
van, being on the road is giving us that perspective. We want to see the traffic flow, how many bikes are on the road, and I think this we can plan for a busy Saturday because of weather and the leaves are changing. So I think we'll see that
might work.
activity on a weekend. So I'm glad we're doing it on a Saturday. But I think we can get what we need from riding in a van and having, you know, any issues that come up. So the board is hearing the same conversation, I think is key. But, you know, like I said, Brian's going to be taping it for the public record, which we should be doing on all of our
And
site visits. So.
Media will be present then, right? It's a public
Media
meeting.
is invited, but I haven't heard from any media that they're going to ride along.
Okay. That's what I need to know. Thanks.
Okay.
And you do not want me riding a bike up there because I'd be the one that
The menace.
would still be at the bottom when you guys were home and having.
Sadly, I don't know if I could ride a bike up there right now.
You could.
E-bikes are so easy now.
Oh,
Anybody
you
could do
definitely
that.
don't want me on a new bike.
All right, so thank you, everyone. So we do have a notice public meeting on Saturday to ride up to the Bells as a board and to meet up there and have a conversation about all of that. And then otherwise, we will see everybody next Tuesday. Thank you all. Have a good week, and thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you. Good job, Kelly.